Disclaimer: this video contains spoilers for Destiny 2 Lightfall and the final shape. There are time codes in the description if you want to jump around. Are we all loaded up? Incredible. Now, darkness awaits. The year is 2022, and Destiny's storytelling model is an interesting beast. Starting with the release of Forsaken in 2018, Bungie decided to open up the storytelling possibilities of this universe beyond just the annual expansions. You know, it's not just about following the major chapters every year, you could also explore various corners in the seasonal material. Every 3 months, a new chapter of the story would begin, keeping players engaged week after week in between the larger drops. What this manages to do is create avenues to explore a whole bunch of characters that may not get nearly as much spotlight otherwise. Someone like Anna Bray may be a one-time character only featured during the Warmind expansion, but with the addition of seasons, she can pop up with relative frequency, allowing players to learn a bit more about her and follow her story on a more long-term basis. This extends to practically everyone, from Commander Zavala to Ikora Rey, even Eris Morn, one of the most interesting characters in the Destiny universe, someone corrupted by the Hive after losing her entire fire team in the Moon's Hellmouth, which leaves her both scarred as well as incredibly knowledgeable on one of the many enemy races we're constantly going up against. There's cool stuff here. But I have to say, I think my favorite character in this universe is actually the Queen of the Awoken, Mara Sov. Now, allow me to preface that it's not for the obvious reason. Okay, it's a little for the obvious reason. However, she is this incredibly powerful character who's hard to really nail down. She's secretive, she's cunning, she's got a hell of a lot going for her. And now, with the release of Season of the Lost as well as the Witch Queen expansion, she has rejoined the cast as one of the major characters to help us as we launch into the future. But for all the benefits that the seasonal model is able to bring, it's also incredibly flawed for a number of reasons. The leading reason being, this stuff doesn't stay in the game very long. The seasonal activities and stories are always temporary. They will exist for the year that they're active, but by the time of the release of the next expansion, they'll go away. It was starting to become a pattern that for every expansion that launched things forward, a huge portion of the game was torn out at the same time. Every time Destiny felt like it was gaining momentum, it was brought back down to square one to build it all up all over again. And the latest release, The Witch Queen, was no different, with the last 4 seasons heading into the dreaded Destiny content vault, alongside 2018's expansion Forsaken. The Tangled Shore and the Forsaken campaign had now been removed from the game. The Dreaming City was still available alongside the endgame material, but the main campaign, the story of the fall of Cayde 6, was no longer available to play. There are some technical reasons for why Bungie finds it necessary to pull things out of the game, but the reputation it has garnered has been nothing but devastating. On top of the fact that it drastically increases the sense of FOMO, the fear of missing out. In order to keep up with Destiny's story, in order to follow along with the deeper intricacies, you have to be on board as it unfolds. You might not have to be there every week as it unfolds in real time, but you gotta be there a little bit each season and definitely each year before this stuff gets removed. And if you're not there, too bad. One of the biggest criticisms Destiny has faced in these last few years, especially with the seasonal model, is that players can no longer play at their own pace. You have to be on the ball at the speed in which Bungie has dictated, which for people who have jobs or lives or families might not always be feasible all the time. Not to mention how challenging it is to get into the game now. With so much removed, it's hard to find a place to start for a new or returning player. All of that being said, there was a lot to be excited about regarding Destiny right now. The Witch Queen set a new benchmark of quality for Destiny campaigns, becoming the most well-regarded story in the game by a mile. Fan-favorite expansions like the Taken King and Forsaken were the high standard before, but to many, the Witch Queen managed to blow those out of the water. In spite of its flaws, Destiny's storytelling was only getting better as the years went on, from more impactful seasons all the way to this latest expansion, which only managed to generate more excitement heading into the future, towards the next expansion expansions that were set to close out this entire journey in 2 big bangs. Destiny 2 Lightfall was set to launch in 2023, with the final shape right behind it in 2024, closing out what was now known as the Light and Darkness saga. We had even had our first encounter with the franchise's big villain. The Witness has been revealed, the orchestrator of our collapse, set to return to bring about an age of darkness once again. People, including some at Bungie, have often used the analogy that the development of Destiny is like building a plane while it was in midair, adding essential pieces while you're in flight, actively approaching your destination. But after a ton of turbulence along the way, the Witch Queen expansion gave plenty of people hope that Bungie might actually be able to land this plane safely. The journey we've embarked on since our ghost woke us up in the Cosmodrome in 2014 is coming to something of a conclusion, and players were getting geared up. For all of the issues, there was promise. For all of the strife, there was hope. This is Destiny, after all. It's nothing if not inconsistent. So with the Witch Queen in players' hands and the roadmap for the future in clear view, they were turning their sights towards the final leg of this journey. They were ready for the ultimate clash of light and dark. If you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. Alright, the darkness isn't going to fight itself, so let's keep this moving. The journey towards Lightfall got kicked off right away. Year 5 of Destiny 2 was here and was launching with the latest chapter, Season of the Risen. This one isn't all that expansive, considering it's attached to a much larger expansion, but it does continue the story in some ways from where the Witch Queen left off in kind of a concurrent campaign. We are once again joined by Keitel and her Cabal Empire to wipe out the Lucent Hive that are storming across the solar system. We work directly with them alongside Lord Saladin. He was of course a major character back in Destiny 1's Rise of Iron expansion, and now he was starting to become a central character once again. But of course we're also here alongside the Crow, one of the most interesting characters this saga has introduced, a revived Aldrin Sov, who now has his memories back and is undoubtedly a little shaken by his past life. Here, as his moral compass is brought to the forefront, Crow accidentally kills one of Empress Keitel's underlings, which would usually mean some kind of death sentence. But Saladin decides to take the fall, becoming one of the Empress's new key lieutenants. So in a lot of ways, the bond between the Vanguard and the Cabal is even stronger than before. We had been growing an alliance with them for about a year now, but this was another step towards unity. They've got forces at the tower, and now one of our guys is among their ranks. Interesting stuff. This was followed by Season of the Haunted, which managed to explore a whole great deal of stuff regarding some of these characters' history. The Leviathan, the prize ship of the Cabal which had been the home of the exiled Emperor Callus, has emerged above the moon's surface. And because of that, these nightmares that we thought we buried during the Shadowkeep expansion have risen once again. And they've begun to torment some of our characters in ways we never really could have expected. They're all tormented by figures of their past. Keitel is haunted by Gaul, by the long history of the Cabal Empire that she now inherits. Can she both live up to the past whilst also carving away a new future? Crow is obviously haunted by Aldrin Sov, continuing that story in an interesting way. Now that Crow knows what he did in his past life, he's made it something of a mission to try and atone for those sins, to make up for the damage he had caused. But of course, that initially takes confronting those sins head on. Not the easiest thing to do. But the most impactful revelations here come with Commander Zavala, as he is haunted by someone named Sophia. As we learn, Zavala has lived a long and storied life. Years and years and years ago, when he was pupil to Lord Saladin, Zavala met a woman named Sophia. At first, they drove each other crazy, but that craziness eventually managed to spark romance. Together, they adopted a son named Hakim and lived a life of solitude. One so effective, Zavala might have even given up his immortality in favor of living and dying with this family. But of course, tragedy would strike. A fallen raiding party attacked their farmhouse, and while Zavala tried to fend them off, his heroism inspired his son Hakim, resulting in his death. Zavala and Sophia were both left shattered as a result of this, and ultimately went their separate ways. Sophia lived the rest of her days until her death, while Zavala became the vanguard leader we all know. This is an enormous expansion into Zavala's history, a chapter of his life that we've never seen before, but it's incredibly interesting. It shows that among these guardians who've lived for centuries, they have storied lives just waiting to be explored. And ultimately, the whole season is all about allowing Keitel, Crow, and Zavala to put these nightmares to rest to some extent, allowing them to come to peace with their pasts. But it also opens a new chapter with a recurring villain, as Callus, the former Cabal Emperor and Keitel's father, has vanished into the ether. He's been a recurring character since Destiny 2's Leviathan raid. He's been this figure hovering above the Cabal for a long time, and now he has become the latest disciple to the Witness. Ooh boy, this long-standing story of Callus has just gotten a bit bigger. He's in the Witnesses camp now. That surely cannot be good for any of us. But at least we got Guardian games. The class competition event that had become an annual tradition was back for its third year. The three classes were once again able to compete in challenges to see who would be the best of the best. While the challenges were a bit more inspired this year compared to past events, there was still no shaking the idea that Bungie was weighing it in favor of one class over the others. This year, Hunters came in third place, Titans came in second place, and absolutely destroying the competition, Warlocks won the whole thing. Meanwhile, the power cap got marginal increases as the seasons continued. Season of the Haunted managed to bring it up to 1560, just 10 points above where it was during the Witch Queen. At the same time, Bungie released an all-new dungeon called Duality. Now, dungeons had already made their way as many players' favorite activity across the game, just short of the hardcore nature of the 6-player raids. But this one was met with criticism because of how you could gain access to it. Many people expected that by just buying the season pass you could unlock the dungeon, but no. You apparently needed to buy the Witch Queen Deluxe Edition. Just getting the expansion itself wouldn't cut it. You gotta shell out more money ahead of time to get access to both of this year's dungeons. And if you hadn't done that, you had to purchase the dungeon key, which was $20. Bungie, just a few months ago, you got bought by Sony for nearly $4 billion. Don't you have enough money by now? Expansions, seasons, anniversary packs, Eververse, dungeon keys, how much more do we have to pay for to get the full experience? Which also begs the question, where's that money going? Because it certainly isn't going to every aspect of the game. Because after a whopping 1,000 days, Bungie finally added one new Crucible map. After skipping out on 2 expansions, Crucible players who'd been starving beyond belief now had one single new map to play on. Honestly, it just feels like they've completely neglected this entire game mode. It's crazy. But hey, the future's still bright. We still got cool things coming up, and Bungie was about to pull the curtain back a little bit to show it off. On August 23rd, 2022, as part of a now yearly tradition, Bungie hosted another livestream celebrating the past year of Destiny 2, whilst also providing big reveals on what was coming up next. And of course, among the many exciting things discussed and shown off during the stream, the big one that fans were most interested in was of course the first look at the next expansion, Lightfall.
When they see this glorious end, they will come for us.
Across this showcase, Bungie pulled the curtain back in a big way for Lightfall, releasing this flashy, pre-rendered trailer showing off a new destination, new Cabal enemies, alongside glimpses of new abilities and new characters along the way, which was further expanded as the showcase continued, revealing that we would be journeying to Neptune for this expansion, to a city called Neomuna, which no one knew existed. And we were going to be able to mess around with an all-new subclass called Strand, this green wire-like subclass which was once again taking powers from the darkness, complete with new supers for each class and the exciting ability to grapple to anywhere from anywhere across the map. You know, many people have said that a great thing to add to any video game is a grapple hook, and it seemed with Strand, Destiny was gonna follow the trend. Everything about this added up to probably one of the most exciting reveals in Destiny's history. I mean, a new world, a new subclass, new abilities, all tied to what promised to be the penultimate story in this saga. I mean, players were gearing up for this game's version of Avengers Infinity War, the story we'd all been waiting for. We're going up against Emperor Callus and his Shadow Legion, and of course, this would be the moment where we finally come face to face with the Witness. Holy crap, dude. This is what we've been working towards the entire time. If there was a hype meter for the Destiny community, it was higher than it had ever been before. But there was also one rather puzzling question on some people's minds after this reveal. Why does it look like that? If I remember back 2 years ago to when Lightfall was first revealed, this is what that title card looked like. This monochrome, Times New Roman text with a pyramid ship eclipsing the Traveler. This was just a bit of text on top of a JPEG, but it gave off a really specific feel, one very fitting for the grand finale. But now it's much brighter. It has this 80s neon-soaked vaporwave kind of aesthetic, with tons of colors popping around every corner. And the title card now looks more like an 80s throwback instead of a foreboding promise of darkness. No one expected this look for Lightfall, not by any means. But if you look at people's consensus online, that wasn't a bad thing. It was unexpected, but they were all like, hell yeah, Neon Destiny for the first half of this finale? Let's go. So calendars were marked for February of 2023, for when the end would begin. Of course, there's plenty more to get excited about regarding Destiny 2 before that happens. For one thing, the game was going to be released on the Epic Games Store. It was going to stay on Steam, of course, but now you had the ability to download it from another launcher. And as an extra selling point, if you downloaded it on the Epic Games Store the week of this showcase, you'd get the Bungie 30th Anniversary Pack for free. In fact, for the week after this showcase, if you downloaded the game on any platform, every expansion was free to play, allowing players to catch up or even get into the game for no extra charge. But that was not the only collaboration with Epic Games, because Destiny-themed skins would be added to both Fall Guys and Fortnite in the coming weeks. Meaning you can head into the Battle Royale as Commander Zavala, Ikora Rey, and even the Exo Stranger if you wanted. Commander Zavala can now hit the gritty. Wild times we're living in. And it was announced by Joe Blackburn and Justin Truman, the game's director and general manager, that they would no longer be vaulting Destiny 2 campaigns going forward. Which, thank God. Their logic is that the story they're currently telling is kicked off by Shadowkeep and the reveal of the pyramid ship under the moon, so they're not going to get rid of that. Though you could argue that the reveal of the pyramids in the Red War campaign is where things really started, so maybe bring all that stuff back, that'd be sick. Because without the Red War campaign, which was an imperfect but solid introduction to this game, the new player onboarding experience was still in dire shape. Thankfully, Bungie did introduce a new opening cutscene for players creating new characters. A new inkblot cutscene introducing you to this universe, the history of the Golden Age that led to the collapse, followed by the rise of the Guardians, the different classes you can choose, the enemy races you'll face. It even reveals the Witness right at the end. To which you might be saying, wow, that's a lot to throw on a new player. And it is. This 5-minute scene may be a more informative introduction to the universe than we've gotten before, especially when compared to Destiny 1, but it's probably too much. All you need to establish is the Golden Age, the collapse, and that ghosts are out there searching for new Guardians to protect the solar system. After that, players can then go through the campaigns and get introduced to the Witness more naturally at the end of the Witch Queen like the rest of us. It's clear that this is designed to immediately get a player up to date so they can start playing the most recent stuff. But in terms of storytelling, this is an incredibly flawed way of going about it. In any event, players could jump into Destiny 2 for free for the next week, they could tackle some of the expansions, and with a purchase of a season pass, explore the latest chapter in the Season of Plunder. A season all about becoming a pirate. You work together with Mizrax, the leader of the House of Light, his daughter Ido, and the Drifter to take on a group of fallen pirates trying to steal artifacts from the distant past. Who might be leading these pirates, you ask? Well, none other than Aramis. The lead villain from the Beyond Light expansion is back and she's pissed, chasing down artifacts of a being known as Nezarec. Nezarec is yet another disciple of the Witness. We already dealt with Rulk back during the Witch Queen, but now Nezarec was starting to become a new focus going forward. There's lots of pirate-themed stuff going on here, with a catch battle activity that feels like a big pirate ship battle. Hell, Mizrax and Aramis even get into a sword fight at the end here. But the relics we're chasing also managed to open up the next chapter. After collecting each of these relics and making sure Aramis can't get her hands on them, Mizrax is able to do what nobody could have ever expected. He turns them into a nice little tea. Yeah, these evil relics from one of the Witness's disciples is turned into a tea, which is then passed on to revive Osiris. Osiris had been unconscious for this past year, after having been possessed by Savathun, the Witch Queen, for the year before. But now, thanks to the super magic Nezarec tea, he's back, he's awake, and he's got some new information for us. While Savathun was able to reach into his mind, he was able to reach briefly into hers, learning of a great city hidden somewhere on Neptune. The details are still fuzzy, but it leaves us with a pretty significant tease for the main location we'll be visiting during Lightfall next year. All of that being said, Season of Plunder is widely regarded as one of the worst seasons in Destiny's history, from the bizarre story choices to the fact that it feels like a bit of a detour. Some definitely liked the pirate aesthetic, but others were more turned off by it. And as a result, morale among the player base dipped significantly lower. People had many pain points with Destiny at this point, which were only exacerbated thanks to the fact that the current season wasn't good enough to balance things out. At the very least, the power cap increased all the way to 1570, and players could tackle the new raid experience. Following on from last year, Bungie once again brought back another Destiny 1 raid into Destiny 2. This time, King's Fall. The raid that concluded the main story of the Taken King, seeing players enter Oryx's throne world to kill him one last time. Now, that challenge was available in Destiny 2, and like the Day 1 raid race of the Vault of Glass last year, this also featured a challenge mode. So in order to win the championship belt, you not only have to beat the raid on normal mode, but run it a second time on challenge mode, completing various challenges alongside the encounters to proceed to the end. With all of this, the raid that many players were familiar with managed to bring along all new obstacles. A team known as Abysmal were able to beat the normal raid first, taking just 2 hours and 32 minutes. But on challenge mode, they fell behind slightly as Team Elysium were able to take the crown, beating the entire thing in 4 hours and 59 minutes. This was quite significant as well because that marks the third win in a row for Team Elysium. They've been cleaning house. Vault of Glass, Vow of the Disciple, and now King's Fall. They had quickly become the team to watch when it came to the Day 1 raid race. They were killing it out there. A little bit later, in October of 2022, Bungie decided to show off their more inclusive side while celebrating National Coming Out Day. They posted a message onto Bungie.net celebrating the various journeys people go through when it comes to coming out as whoever they might be, even offering words of kindness to those who may not be able to come out for one reason or another. And coupled with this, they also revealed the canon sexuality of a number of Destiny characters. Aramis is lesbian, the Drifter is pansexual, which surprised absolutely no one, Saint 14 is gay, which was double confirmed in-game once Osiris was able to awaken thanks to the special tea, because Osiris and Saint managed to share the first on-screen kiss in Destiny history so far, so there was no denying it anymore. Mara Sov was confirmed to be bisexual, which also ties into some of the deeper lore of her character that you can read in the lore books. And finally, Nimbus, a character set to debut in the upcoming Lightfall expansion, was confirmed to be non-binary. Bungie has been under scrutiny many times in the past for a potentially toxic workplace environment, but they wanted to shine a spotlight on a number of characters in the game in an effort to make people feel a little bit more included, which is certainly nicer than the alternative. Season of the Seraph picked up not too long after. Following Osiris' awakening and the visions he's had regarding a hidden Neptunian city, the pieces are being put in place for the release of Lightfall, which brings us some monumental events in the larger ongoing Destiny story, because this season is all about Rasputin. Ever since the arrival of the pyramid ships, Rasputin has been out of commission, but it's thanks to the efforts of Osiris, Anna Bray, as well as Elsie Bray that Rasputin is able to come back online for a brief moment, occupying this prototype exo body. Rasputin has constantly been a topic of discussion among characters in this universe. Can he be trusted? Can this weapon of ultimate power really be left unchecked? But with the Black Fleet approaching closer and closer by the day, Rasputin remains the single best hope humanity has to stop the encroaching darkness. And we finally begin to discover some real pieces of information regarding Rasputin that give us a far clearer picture on who this character really is. We reveal that Rasputin's original purpose actually wasn't to protect the solar system like everyone believed. It turns out Clovis Bray actually built him with the power to destroy the Traveler so that he might take its place as the new god that Clovis could control. It was only with the help of Anna Bray, before she was a guardian, that Rasputin slowly began to grow a conscience. He was supremely intelligent, and Anna was able to provide him education in terms of literature, philosophy, music, all that stuff. What this does is it makes Rasputin way more human than he's ever been before, and strengthens the bond between him and the Anna Bray we know now. But of course, healing Rasputin won't be easy. Xivu Arath and her forces are causing havoc on us left and right, and Aramis is also here trying to gain access to Rasputin's technology, directly on behalf of the Witness. So it becomes a question of how far must we go to help Rasputin to give us an edge against the Witness without creating the very weapon that can be used to destroy us as well. At least the power cap went up by 10 points once again, jumping up to 1580 power to give you just that much more room to level up your guy. But that doesn't stop the fast approaching darkness, because Lightfall is right around the corner. Before 2022 came to a close, the big promotional push for this next expansion really took off, which all started with a brand new trailer released during the Game Awards on December 8th. And this was simply a flashy 90-second showcase of everything the expansion had to offer. From the new location to new looks at Strand, some great looks at shooting a bunch of Cabal bad guys, with vague looks at what the story was about to hold. There wasn't a ton here, but it brought the simple statement, "Our end begins." I'm too damn young to live on the light. I'm used to the darkness. I'm used to the darkness. Hey! Promotional efforts only continued into 2023, leading to the late February release. There was a trailer showcasing the new destination of Neomuna on Neptune, how it's being invaded by Callus's forces, and how he must team up with new friends in order to fend them off. This was followed up by trailers that showed off some of the new gear you could acquire, and a great look at the new Strand subclass and its various abilities, with the simple tagline, "When light falls, unleash Strand." Eventually, Bungie released a 16-minute VDoc detailing everything Lightfall had to offer, from weapons to gear to some of the new in-game features like loadouts, as well as details on the new destination and the next season coming with the launch of Lightfall. The biggest thing, though, was they pulled back just a little bit when it came to details surrounding the story that players are about to experience. Because after all these years of building up the Light and Darkness saga, this is where it reaches a major turning point.
We were created for this moment, to deal with this conflict, to solve for this enemy.
What the hell happens when evil finally arrives and confronts the Traveler?
Stakes were high, things were going insane, the journey we've been embarking on is nearing its end, and we've gotta be ready. Even in-universe, the final pieces were put in place for the beginning of the end, because Season of the Seraph came through with its last story beats to set up the coming of Lightfall, all by bringing an end to the story of Rasputin. Because Aramis, in a surprising move, has suddenly gained control of Rasputin's warsats, meaning she will be able to use them to fulfill their original intention. She'll be able to use them to destroy the Traveler. There's only one real way to stop her, and that's to kill Rasputin, deleting every line of his code to destroy the warsats and prevent their use against the Traveler. Which all leads to this fantastic final cutscene to close out the season. One big 4-minute sequence where so many things start coming to a head. The threat against the Traveler causes a reaction, as it begins to ascend away from the last city. In a total shock to players and even the characters in-universe, the Traveler begins to leave. Just as it's done to so many worlds throughout the game's history, it is about to abandon Earth as well. Aramis begins arming the Warsats, pointing them directly at the Traveler, ready to pull the trigger. And now, left with no other choice, Anna Bray has to make the ultimate sacrifice and kill Rasputin. Rasputin has been a constant in this universe since vanilla Destiny 1, and he was promised to be the one weapon that might have a fighting chance against the Black Fleet. But now, due to these extraneous circumstances, he was forced to be shut down forever. Some players were quite satisfied with this rather tragic and understated end, but others felt like Rasputin wasn't being utilized enough and that this was written in to remove him from the board. In any event, this is incredibly emotional for characters in-universe, especially Anna Bray, who's made it her life's mission to uncover the secrets of Rasputin and utilize him for good. But now that he's dead, it's bad news bears for just about everyone. The Traveler didn't leave completely, thank God. It just stopped above the planet, which directly recreates one of the very first teaser images for this game from all the way back in 2013. I mean, after a decade, that image has made its way into the game. But while it's not fully abandoning us, that doesn't mean it's safe.
Why? Why does it not flee?
Because it has nowhere else to run.
The Black Fleet has arrived. The Witness is here. And without Rasputin to stop it, we're in for one hell of a steep climb to victory. The events that will lead to a second collapse have come, and it's our job to find some miracle to shut it down once and for all. The promotional cycle for Lightfall was finally capped off with the launch trailer just days before the expansion's release, which compiled the best look at the story yet into a quick 2-minute trailer, showing off many cinematic moments, the threat of the Witness, and the darkness we were all about to encounter, all of which was eerily set to the song Karma Police by AG and Lizzie, which gave it this foreboding sense of terror that hadn't quite been present in any of the marketing so far. But it managed to get people excited in the final push. Once again, the hype levels among the player base was absolutely unmatched. Lightfall was the biggest, baddest expansion we'd ever gotten. The beginning of the end of this story we'd been following for nearly a decade, and everyone was on board to see what would happen. Once again, Destiny managed to break through to near mainstream appeal, just like it had with the initial launch of both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. More eyes were on this game than they had been recently. This was the event to look out for. Hardcore fans were totally on board, players who hadn't been around for a while were back to see how this story was going to unfold, and it was gonna cost just a tiny bit more money. Every major expansion since The Taken King has been priced at $40. Forsaken, The Witch Queen, all of them were $40. But now Lightfall was going to increase that price all the way to $50, which might not sound like that much more, and is likely a byproduct of inflation sucking absolute butt, but it still made a statement. Lightfall was worth more than any previous Destiny expansion. This was the big one, and the barrier to entry was just that much higher to experience the beginning of the end. From there, you could pick up the Deluxe Edition for $100, which contained the annual pass for the next 4 seasons for Year 6, and access to the 2 dungeons that would release during the year. Or you could buy the Collector's Edition for a whopping $150, which came with all of that, plus some additional pieces of loot including a puka model, this creature that was floating around the Exo Stranger back in Beyond Light, which is going to be revealed to have come from Neptune in this expansion. The player base was fully on board now. As the updates rolled out and the new additions were added to the game, everyone was ready and waiting to see Bungie's slam dunk of a finale. It's all led to this. The clock had now turned to February 28th, 2023. The Witness is here. So pop out your ghosts and head up to orbit because it's now time to begin the end. Things kick off with a bang. A battle has already begun between the forces of the Tower and the Black Fleet around the Traveler. We got big action shots, tons of ships flying around with explosions and intensity. Hell, even the Traveler gets involved, shooting this big laser at the pyramids that grows a whole bunch of weird tree things. After years of this ball doing nothing, it's actually deciding to get in on the action, which is awesome. But of course, the Witness is extremely powerful. It can just float through that beam without even a second thought. Worse than that, it controls the Black Fleet with a flick of a wrist and can even immediately cut Guardians and Ghosts to ribbons with a thought. This is one startling showcase for the Witness to kick off this expansion, and I for one can't wait to finally find a way to take it down. There's only one little problem. We don't. When trying to connect with the Traveler, the Witness gets a vision of Neptune. There's something there it needs, and so it immediately sends Callus and his forces to the planet to look into it. Of course, Osiris has had visions of Neptune already, so he immediately follows, and by extension, we follow him. So what the story becomes is a chase for an artifact called the Veil on Neptune. We've got to reach it before Callus does. While the Witness and the Vanguard just kind of hang out back on Earth, they're just waiting around while we figure out everything on Neptune? Alright, I guess. The longer the campaign goes and the more you realize that we're not actually going to face off against the Witness here, the more bummed I become. Because it brings me no pleasure to say that Destiny 2 Lightfall sucks. Bungie dropped the ball here monumentally. After finally landing on something exceptional with the Witch Queen, everything about Lightfall is one enormous step backwards. After a 9-year saga, it comes to a head in a story that is really just one big detour, introducing a bunch of new stuff that has never been established in this game before, yet we're told is really important all of a sudden. We're introduced to this new city of Neomuna, which was apparently created after the collapse, never quite feeling the impact of its devastation like everywhere else. This destination is what gives us our 80s vaporwave nostalgic aesthetic, with enormous towers and neon lights everywhere, which, as cool as that might look, it definitely contrasts from the aesthetic Bungie has nailed for this game so far. The central theme has always been abandoned civilization overtaken by nature. Every destination has nailed that look in some way, yet this one feels noticeably different. Now that might not necessarily be a bad thing, variety is the spice of life and all, but it is in direct opposition to the visual identity this game has created everywhere else. Not to mention, while it's really big and expansive, it also feels quite empty. There's no one around but the various enemies and occasionally other guardians. The game does come up with a reason for this, as it's revealed that the population of Neomuna is actually asleep at all times because they mostly inhabit this virtual reality world called the Cloud Arc. And as the story goes, they're mostly represented by these hologram things, because I imagine that was much cheaper to put together than actual NPC models that could run around. The citizens of Neomuna are not alone, though, as this expansion introduces us to the Cloud Striders, 2 enormous 9-foot-tall soldiers with chrome plating and skateboard knife things.
Welcome to Neomuna!
These guys are another aspect that I think clashes with the overall visual aesthetic for this game. I mean, Destiny features plenty of different design languages. From the different alien races to the different classes, there's tons of variety. And yet, when I look at the Cloud Striders, they simply don't look like they belong in Destiny. They're too different in a way that's distracting. The 2 characters we have here are Nimbus and Rohan. Nimbus is the hot-headed rookie, and Rohan is the older and wiser mentor kind of character. Unfortunately, as characters, they're a bit hit or miss. Rohan doesn't seem to have any discernible character traits, and while Nimbus does, they can be pretty grating. Because they're going a bit more for that over-the-top comedic surfer dude kind of route, and it just feels completely jarring for what this expansion is seemingly trying to do. Bungie wanted to strike the balance of a darker story that still had the ability to create some laughs, like you'd find in a blockbuster movie. But that balance was not struck here at all. Nimbus is too comedic for what is supposedly the penultimate adventure, the first face-off against the Witness and the Black Fleet. The threat we've been building up to is here, and all hands should be on deck. And yet here's this guy running around like it's the best day of their life.
I'm full of fury, she's got an army, and you got magic green strings. Let's crush this callous guy.
But I think Nimbus is only a symptom of this expansion's problems. They're just a manifestation of the larger misguided aims. This expansion sees us travel to Neptune to locate the Veil before Callus and his forces can, because they want to use the radial mass to connect the Veil to the Traveler. You might be asking, what the hell does any of that mean? To which I say, I don't know. It's never made clear within the story. We're just introduced to these things that everyone already believes are important, but no one ever takes the time to let us in on why they're so important. It's Destiny 1 all over again.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Even the level design kind of harkens back to Destiny 1. There's a whole section here where you have to hold out against multiple waves of bad guys while your ghost scans a device. I thought we'd moved so far beyond that kind of mechanic in the last 9 years, but I guess not. We're still going down that old well. As we traverse Neptune, we explore various corners of this new world, including Callus's enormous command ship, which does look cool, with tons of pyramid architecture and dark corners you can explore. You're also facing off against many of the same enemies as before, which can be a little underwhelming. The Taken make a comeback, the Vex are here, and of course our main threat is the Cabal, this time under the banner of the Shadow Legion. They do have at least one slight difference, as some Cabal soldiers will carry these pyramid embers that can generate shields for nearby enemies, so you gotta take them down as they appear to make it easier to fight everyone else. There is at least one new enemy type here called a Tormentor, a creature with many visual similarities to Rulk from the Vow of the Disciple raid. These guys are tough. They rush around with these enormous scythes, they can catch you in their hand and drain you a little bit, they jump around, they slam the ground, they can be pretty terrifying. It takes a bit of precision to take them down. You gotta shoot out their shoulders before concentrating fire on the chest. Those are the critical weak spots to taking them down. And thankfully, there is one major highlight to this expansion that keeps things somewhat above water. Strand. As you explore Neomuna, you'll start to see these green threads floating in the air. You don't quite understand what they are, but in due time you begin to harness them as your own power, giving you yet another darkness subclass, stretching out into the ether to grab the literal web of the universe, stringing it together to create what you need. Every class now has new abilities, they have a new melee ability, their class ability gets a slight upgrade, and in place of a grenade, everyone gets access to a grapple. Every game needs a good grapple, and Destiny's grapple is solid. You can latch onto these balls of strand in midair, which gives you an instant recharge. You can latch onto nothing in the air, which is crazy. You can even grapple onto ships and follow them into the air. It's awesome. Though I did actually have a tough time figuring out traversal and momentum. Maybe that's the flaw with being a warlock instead of a titan or hunter, but I ran into a couple problems. The thing I did enjoy is that you could grapple towards enemies and charge up a melee attack, which just destroys everyone in a certain radius. That absolutely rules. Then, of course, with a new subclass comes a new super. Hunters have the Threadrunner subclass, which comes with the Silk Strike super, allowing them to forge a rope dart that they can swing around and slice at enemies all around them. Titans have the Berserker subclass, complete with the Blade Fury super. They can create these big claws around their fists to attack enemies and even do a ground slam. And finally, Warlocks have the Broodweaver subclass, with the Needle Storm super, allowing you to create deadly needles and throw them at enemies. Don't worry about missing either, because they will turn into these threadlings that'll run through the ground and attack nearby enemies. There's a lot of fun to be had with Strand here, and it is undeniably the highlight of this expansion. The unfortunate reality is that the rollout, once again, kinda sucks. Like Stasis before it, Strand is doled out to you over the course of the campaign. There isn't one big level where you just get the subclass for the rest of the campaign. It's something the game routinely gives you for a little bit, then takes away. The positive difference is that these moments do last a bit longer, are a bit more frequent, and even help face off against certain obstacles. Sometimes you'll come across these suppressors that take away your existing supers if you're nearby. They're essentially Callus's way of neutralizing you from a distance, but he can only neutralize the powers he knows about. So once you get access to Strand, you can destroy these suppressors because they weren't built to handle it. The frustrating thing is that because you get access to this more often and for longer periods of time, time, every time the game takes it away feels horrible. You get so many points during the story where it feels like you're about to master Strand and you'll finally unlock it as a subclass, only for the game to rip it away from you again. One level even starts with an 80s themed training montage, and even after that, even after going through that mission and making significant breakthroughs with Strand, you still haven't unlocked the subclass. It's crazy. At the very least, this latest foray into darkness gives us a greater understanding of the light and darkness than we've ever had before, which is all illustrated in one of the best cutscenes narrated by Osiris, where he deduces that while we initially believe light and dark to be synonymous with good and evil, that's really not true at all. Of course, we know darkness can be used for good, and light can be used for evil. What we ultimately learn is that light is more tied to the physical reality of the universe, while darkness is more tied to consciousness, the mental reality. Which is why the Traveler can bring about golden ages for civilizations. It's essentially a terraformer, as Osiris says, while the pyramids reach into our minds and manifest various things, either as further connections to the universe itself, or as nightmares. In amidst a story that kinda sucks a whole lot of butt, this is a revelation and sequence that's pretty cool, and helps develop an aspect of the universe that has been laid through for years at this point. It's also worth noting that, like always, the music is a real standout of this expansion. The whole musical team killed it yet again with some incredible tracks. Though with all of the action motifs and big 80s moments throughout the soundtrack, the stuff I find myself going back to is the calmer stuff. The beginning of the track Discipline is a real standout. But while there are definite highlights to the Lightfall experience, that doesn't distract from the overall problems with the story. Things are left unexplained. The veil and radial mast are left almost completely undefined, and the new characters are given no time for you to understand who they are. Which is terrible for Rohan because partway through the story, he makes the sacrifice to ultimately destroy the radial mast, hindering Callus's plans.
Nimbus, see you on the other side.
Rohan, what are you doing?
And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I didn't really know who that guy was or what this means, so I can't say I'm all that affected. The interesting thing to note, though, is that Lightfall is a story that could work under different circumstances. It definitely needs some punching up, but there are ideas and aesthetic choices in here that could be interesting if it was released after this saga was over. The crux of Lightfall's problems is that it's the wrong story at the wrong time. After the Witch Queen brought us into slightly darker territory, revealing a twist-laden story that introduced us to the ultimate villain of this entire universe, Lightfall makes the bizarre choice to lighten things up again. The 80s vaporwave direction stuck out during the trailer, but it now feels entirely wrong once you put it into this larger context. Like, why are we doing a more lighthearted 80s homage during what's supposed to be the darkest, most intense hour for this universe? Pretty quickly, people were able to figure out that this was not always what this expansion was supposed to be. When Bungie revealed the Lightfall title back in 2020, not only did its aesthetic look completely different, it's been all but confirmed that the expansion they were talking about at that moment is not this one. Whatever that expansion was, it had to be delayed for one reason or another, and was eventually renamed The Final Shape. But they still needed an expansion to fill the gap, and since they probably had the Lightfall trademark secured by that point, they decided to keep the name when creating this all-new story to bide time before the finale. That explains why so many elements in here were not set up previously at all. I mean, there was one message about the veil from Rasputin right at the end of Season of the Seraph, but other than that, everything in here was introduced with this expansion. There were even some theories suggesting that Strand was supposed to be introduced back during the Witch Queen expansion. It fits in line with a lot of the motifs there regarding Threadbearer wizards, the green color scheme, all sorts of stuff. Though, according to game director Joe Blackburn, that was never the plan. Strand was always a part of Lightfall. Whether or not that's true is a different question, because it does seem natural to see the original plans for Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Lightfall as a trilogy, each introducing a new subclass for players to mess around with. But since the original plans for Lightfall were delayed until the final shape, everything had to be moved around, which leaves us with a current version of Lightfall that ultimately tanks the momentum that the game had been able to achieve. Destiny has garnered a number of comparisons to the MCU, for reasons that make a lot of sense. I mean, a 10-year ongoing saga featuring interweaving plot lines and characters, post-credit scenes teasing the future years in advance, and a big bad guy on their way to destroy everything we've ever known and loved. And Lightfall, being the penultimate expansion before the final shape, is poised to be this game's Infinity War. But it's really not Infinity War at all. This is like if instead of Infinity War, the movie the MCU had been building up to for 10 years was actually Thor Ragnarok. Which on its own is a fun movie, but it certainly wouldn't work as the penultimate episode of the whole thing.
Well, the uglier they are, the harder they fall, right? No? Come on.
But things get worse once you finally reach the ending of this story, because everything builds to a final standoff against Callus, someone who has been done absolutely no favors in this story. Since he's the latest disciple of the Witness, he's essentially playing second fiddle to the character I'm actually interested in. There are a couple really cool scenes in here with Callus and the Witness, but that just makes me want to fight the Witness more. Like, get out of my way, Callus, I want to go stop the actually interesting threat. But Callus has to go down first. During the final mission, we join up with Keitel in this big holdout section taking down a bunch of Shadow Legion Cabal. And eventually we head into the depths below the city of Neomuna to chase down Callus himself. And we even see the Veil for the first time.
That must be the Veil. It's massive. I feel a little strange. Don't know how to describe it. It almost gives me the same feeling as the Traveler. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
This is where it all comes to a head. It's just us and Callus in this big arena. There are grapple points that you can use, if you're not so terrible with the grapple that you fall into the abyss and die. But you gotta shoot Callus real good, fight off a tormentor or two, before finally bringing the big guy down once and for all. Callus is finally defeated. This long-running story for the Cabal has finally been wrapped up. Unfortunately, it does feel like it squanders the potential of this conclusion, given that, for whatever reason, Keitel, Callus's daughter, isn't there when Callus goes down. She just hears about it on the radio. There was this great opportunity for this conflict to manifest in a real way here, and the game doesn't really take it. At the very least, now that Callus is dead, and since the radial mast was destroyed by Rohan, there's no way for the Witness to connect the Veil to the Traveler. All of our efforts have secured our victory. Unless, of course, the Witness can just take control of our Ghost and use him to connect the Veil, shooting a big ol' laser across the solar system.
What just happened?
We just lost.
Wait, what? What do you mean we just lost? Apparently, this is all the Witness needed, as now it's able to create this big triangular portal into the Traveler. As a result, both it and its Black Fleet are able to fly inside, all in pursuit of the dreaded final shape. And that's it. That's the end of the story. But, if you can believe it, it gets worse. The fact that this expansion was built purely to bide time became incredibly clear once people realized you could stitch the opening and closing cutscenes of this story together seamlessly. You could jump from the Witness showing up and wiping the floor with everybody at the start, all the way to the moment it enters the Traveler and actually lose nothing. So at the end of the day, there was no part of this expansion that actually mattered. And even after the Witness has seemingly claimed victory, characters like Zavala and Ikora don't seem all that cut up about it. When you talk to them in the post-campaign roundup, they really don't seem all that fussed that we just lost the biggest battle we've ever faced. The game is both trying to say that this moment is a really big deal, while also having characters that aren't acting like it's all that big of a deal. Allow me to amend my earlier MCU analogy. This is like if the Infinity Saga had been building up to Thor Ragnarok the whole time, but if that movie was the very first time the Infinity Stones were ever introduced, they were also never explained, and it ended with Thanos snapping his fingers. Only for characters to then say, "Ah, shucks, we'll get him next time." I know the analogy's getting a little convoluted, but that's what this really is. Despite being poised as the beginning of the end, this expansion is the very definition of filler. Critical reception for Lightfall was at an all-time low. It was almost shocking the immediate backlash that this expansion received. Some reviews sang the praises of certain aspects like Strand, but many others were more cutthroat in their reviews on the expansion, from its story to its characters. Some would even consider this to be the worst expansion release for Destiny ever. Which, I don't know if I would go that far, if only because this adds more than something like Curse of Osiris. But in terms of its place in the larger series, blundering now is devastating. And I think it provided a lot of damage to Destiny 2 in terms of PR. It's still not as bad as removing stuff from the game, but this was pretty bad. I mean, like a lot of fan bases out there, the Destiny fanbase can be accused of saying, yeah, this one isn't great, but the next one will be good. There's always the next one. The next one will be better. We're building to the next one, which will make all of this worth it. Now we're at Lightfall, and this is supposed to be the fabled next one that brings it all together. So everyone came rolling back only to see that it was yet another teaser for the next one. You can be easily forgiven for jumping ship at this point, for believing that after all this time, Destiny was not gonna stick the landing after all. One can only hope that because it was a filler expansion, it doesn't actually reflect the quality people can expect from the final shape. But that's just me falling back into the trap. Don't worry guys, the next one will be good. Once again, when the game was poised to go back to the mainstream, Bungie dropped the ball. Third time's the charm, third time to kill all the momentum you could have gained. And players began looking back to the Witch Queen to ask themselves, was that a fluke? Was the best expansion in Destiny's history made by accident? What was initially a promising leap in quality became perhaps the only time Destiny would actually find its footing. Excitement for the final shape very quickly turned into dread going forward, which was not great. But of course, the player count didn't completely vanish off the face of the earth. There were a lot of people who did stick around after Lightfall. Some players were still engaged, taking in all of the new mechanics and upgrades they could after the campaign came to a close, and they entered the end game. Given that this is a major expansion release, the power cap took on a significant jump, launching from 1580 all the way to 1800, with the floor coming up behind it, starting everyone off at 1600. Players could now experiment with loadouts, which were fantastic, allowing them to create their build that they enjoyed going into endgame encounters, then immediately switch to other builds that were made for different kinds of encounters. There was also the all-new leveling system. Now, on top of the power leveling system and the season rank, there was the Guardian rank, a rank from 1 to 11, which is not based on experience points, but rather actual experience. This was implemented to give players a roadmap to follow. It provides them with a list of tasks to complete. If they complete each one, they will level up to the next rank where they're given more tasks. They take Guardians to every corner of the game, from PvE to PvP to Gambit, everything you can think of. And whatever rank you were would now be displayed for all other Guardians. So no longer did players see other people's seasonal rank, it was now about their Guardian rank. Beyond that, there's new stuff to do, like 3 new Lost sectors. There's 1 new strike, which is once again baked into the campaign, seeing you enter the Vex network to fight a bunch of Taken. You even get to ride a Sparrow around it. That's fun. Then, of course, following on from the end of Lightfall's campaign, players could explore more of the additional story in the aftermath. On one side, you're tasked with cleaning up the Hall of Heroes, exploring the past of Neomuna and the Cloud Striders that have served over the years. You're also there helping Nimbus deal with their own grief over the loss of Rohan, how they don't think they even can grieve, and how they ultimately come to a moment of acceptance in the fact that their mentor has now fallen. And eventually, everything led to the all-new raid. as players geared up and joined a 6-person fire team to take on the Root of Nightmares, which takes them all the way back to Earth, to the one pyramid ship that had been left behind by the Witness, the one that was most affected by the Traveler's terraforming. Players journey inside, exploring an incredible mixture of pyramid architecture and these weaving branches created by the Traveler, which looks absolutely fantastic. They even visit this room with floating planets orbiting around, which is of course the very same room we first saw the Witness in right at the end of the Witch Queen. And all of this is on a quest to defeat the fabled Root of Nightmares, the final god of pain, also known as Nezarec. Nezarec is a character that we'd been hearing about quite a bit this past year, but he had also had ties throughout the long-standing lore. In fact, he was dead. He was just straight up dead before, and his head was placed within this pyramid, and only because of the Traveler's terraforming was he suddenly brought back to life to torment us. So now it's up to Guardians to face him down and defeat him one more time. The only problem was, people found this raid to be way too easy. Raids are usually the pinnacle activity that challenges players more than anything else, especially during day 1 when contest mode is activated, increasing the difficulty. I mean hell, contest mode was even extended this time. In previous day 1 raid races, contest mode was only active for the first 24 hours. The only exception to this was Vow of the Disciple, which was extended to 48 hours to counterbalance against the numerous problems players faced during the day 1 race. Starting with Root of Nightmares though, 48 hours had become standardized, which would not only help with any day 1 issues, but it also seemed to send the signal that this might take a very long time to complete. But once all was said and done, the team hard in the paint managed to defeat Nezarec and complete the entire thing in just 2 hours and 25 minutes. This is one of the fastest world's first races. In fact, Root of Nightmares has more day 1 clears than every raid before it combined. On one hand, this was a fantastic entry point for those looking to get into raids. You know, this is a good place to start before delving into some of the harder challenges like Last Wish. But for the hardcore player base excited to delve into this experience on day 1, the lack of difficulty was quite disappointing. Despite being the penultimate raid of this saga, it managed to become a cakewalk for a great many players out there. Players hoping for something that could challenge them like some raids had in the past. With some players even expressing disappointment that maybe Bungie couldn't create an experience like Last Wish again, which still had the title of longest world's first race in Destiny history. All of this helped to cement the mixed to negative reception players had to Lightfall. The campaign wasn't great, the characters weren't interesting, the raid was disappointing, there was lots to complain about at this point, and morale was quickly reaching a new low. But in unfortunate news, outside of the game, people learned of a rather significant tragedy. Because on March 17th, Lance Reddick unfortunately passed away. He had of course been the voice of Commander Zavala since Destiny 1 launched back in 2014, and had become a fan favorite character in all his appearances since. He brought gravitas and a weight to this character that made him stand out. But even beyond Destiny, he had plenty of roles that people enjoyed. From the TV shows Fringe and The Wire, to his appearance in the John Wick movies, the 4th one releasing just 1 week after his passing. And he was also arguably the greatest guest on the Eric Andre show.
Need a new desk.
But on top of all of that, what made him additionally special to Destiny was the fact that he himself was a fan. He was a frequent player just like anyone else. It was even discovered that the day before he died, he was logged in playing the game alongside everyone else. Following this, players would gather around Zavala's location in the tower, paying their respects to the late actor. And Bungie themselves would put a message in-game for those logging in the days after, paying their own respects. And while there had been enough recorded material to carry Zavala through the next few seasons, someone else would have to take on the voice in the final shape. The question is, who? Who do you get to follow in the footsteps of Lance Reddick? Well, they managed to pick perhaps the best man to complete this story, Keith David. Keith David, of course, has had a wildly successful career in both acting and voice acting, with a number of characters under his belt. He was even Barricade in the 2007 Transformers tie-in games, but he also has ties to Bungie's past, voicing the Arbiter in Halo 2 and 3. In the unfortunate scenario that this was, there was no one better to complete Zavala's journey in the final shape than Keith David, and fans were looking forward to seeing how he would honor this character in the coming year. Because, of course, with the release of Lightfall, players were now rocketed into Year 6. The story was going to continue as pieces had to be put in place before Guardians could finally begin their pursuit of the Witness, which all began with Season of Defiance. The unfortunate truth is, even while we've moved beyond the disappointing Lightfall story, the following year of seasons actually continues to be underwhelming. It makes sense, right? Not only did Bungie have to create a filler expansion to bide time before the final shape, but they also had to create filler seasons to keep things active. So while there are highlights throughout Year 6, there are also lowlights. Season of Defiance mostly centers around Amanda Holliday, the shipwright in the tower who's always been one of the characters with the most personality. We learn a great deal about her past, what motivates her, what gets her excited to keep working and fly around the world. And while she has been a regularly appearing character since the very first days of Destiny's lifespan, this sudden exploration into who she is here left players with a very simple prediction. She's gonna die. What people did not expect was just how lackluster that moment was going to be. During a cutscene towards the end of the season, Amanda Holliday is put in a situation where she's unable to escape a Cabal structure before it self-destructs. She manages to hotwire one of the doors to let others escape, but she herself can't get out in time, which only leads to... The game is presenting this moment as if it's on par with Cade's death back in Forsaken. Every character is extremely cut up about this. We're getting these incredibly emotional moments from characters like Crow and especially Zavala, who gives a nice eulogy for Amanda. But the scene itself has no dramatic thrust whatsoever. My explanation for why Amanda gets caught up in this actually has slightly more context in the scene itself. It's a moment that comes completely out of nowhere, and so players were left with this feeling not of satisfaction, but of... what? Many players theorize that perhaps Amanda was supposed to die somewhere else, but due to the shuffling of this whole year, it was forced into a small seasonal activity, which unfortunately did it no favors. After this, a memorial was placed where Amanda Holliday used to reside as a vendor, and Zavala's taken on her bandana as part of his shoulder pad. Before, he had a gray cloth there, even dating back to Destiny 1, but now he was sporting Amanda Holliday's red bandana as tribute, which even retroactively impacts any in-game scene featuring this character, even scenes set before this moment. Although, funnily enough, if you create a new Guardian and go through the new Light quest, you'll still be introduced to Holliday as if she's an active character. That is true to this day. I guess new players gotta be introduced to her expecting that she'll be a major part of the story, and then they'll immediately learn that she's dead now, actually. That's cool. This was followed up by the next lackluster season, Season of the Deep. To the shock of everyone, Titan has popped back up into the sky. Titan was one of the major destinations in vanilla Destiny 2, but vanished into the Destiny content vault a couple years later. Now it's back, alongside its vendor Deputy Commander Sloan, who's been absent from the game for 3 years by this point, only now she's partially corrupted by Taken energy. Apparently she's here to help protect this proto-worm god that resides in the oceans of Titan, a worm god named Asa, which actually manages to reveal a ton of critical information about the Witness. Billions and billions of years ago, a species known as the Precursors were the first ever civilization to come into contact with the Traveler. They called it the Gardener. It gave them their own golden age, their own bountiful world to call home. But the Precursors sought more purpose than the Traveler could offer. They sought out its opposite, the Veil. If the Veil and the Traveler could be combined, if the powers of light and dark could be fused, the Precursors could create meaning within a meaningless universe. But of course, the Traveler resisted and abandoned the Precursors, leaving them starved and filled with rage. So, the entire collective species of the Precursors decided to meld themselves into one being. They combined their consciousnesses into one entity more powerful than all of them combined. an entire species wrapped up in one person named the Witness. That explains why the Witness's voice actually echoes with multiple voices layered on top of one another, why its arms will visibly echo as they move, why its head is billowing with smoke featuring infinite identical faces. The Witness is an entire species melded into one. This is all really cool stuff. Players could even learn more about the Veil by listening to these audio logs on Neptune, which provided insight from a Neptunian scientist researching some of its properties. There's tons of interesting stuff in here, tons of vital information regarding this entity as well as the main villain we've been building up to for the last couple years. But this leaves two rather significant caveats. One, why the hell was this not in Lightfall? This feels like a perfect batch of information for players to know during the Lightfall campaign, and yet it's shunned aside for the 5th week of the 21st season, during a moment when the player count is dropping like it's Niagara Falls. This is really cool stuff, but as many people pointed out, including Destiny's own resident lore guy My Name is Bife, it's too little too late. But you could also be forgiven for thinking that this wasn't a satisfying reveal at all, because this confirms something that players had been suspecting for a little while now. The pyramids are empty. For the years that the pyramids have been teased since the launch of Vanilla Destiny 2, players have wondered who could be inside them. What crazy enemy would we be fighting once they arrived? And the potential of that was even realized with the reveal of Rulk and Nezarec. If each pyramid's got someone like that, or an army of characters like that, that'd be insane. But this reveals that the pyramids are empty, that the Witness controls them as its weapons, I guess? This was one of the many moments where it felt Destiny 2 was not living up to the potential that it had been setting up. Rasputin was another big one, wiped off the board without being able to fulfill what players wanted. Factions within the last city were completely gone, removing any alternate perspectives within our own ranks as to how this stuff works. It's been flattened down to we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. And now the pyramid ships are empty. I, for one, think the reveal of the Witness's backstory and identity is really cool, but I admit it is disappointing that the potential of having a bunch of new enemies feels squandered here. It's always a double-edged sword with this game. Things are cool and disappointing at the same time. It's hard to have a W that is able to stand on its own. But hey, at least you can go fishing now. With the release of this season, players could now journey to the EDZ, Nessus, and Savathun's throne world to fish for various items. There's really nothing else to it. It's a fishing minigame. Just a calm day out with some other guardians. But of course, for all the fun in games, this is still ostensibly a dark time for our characters, and the final chapter still looms in the not-too-distant future. What was that future gonna hold? Players would get a glimpse sooner than they expected, because during PlayStation's 2023 showcase on May 24th, Bungie made a bit of a presence, finally showing off for the very first time, Marathon. That's right, Bungie had been working on another game in the background all this time. It had been known for a little bit now that they were working on another game, hoping to get something non-Destiny related out to players before 2025. In fact, it had been known for a little while that Bungie was working on several games behind the scenes, several incubation projects alongside Destiny 2. In the 2020s, Bungie had a goal. They wanted to become a multi-game studio just like some of their contemporaries. They wanted to be like Blizzard, who not only had the wildly successful World of Warcraft, but also Overwatch. Bungie could have a piece of that pie too, having Destiny alongside some other games that they could chew on over time. At least 4 incubation projects were known at this point, each under code names. You had Matter, you had Gummy Bears, you had Payback, and finally, you had Marathon. That last one obviously isn't a codename, considering that is the official title, following up from Bungie's original first-person shooter from the 90s, the shooter they made before Halo. This time it was going to be a multiplayer extraction shooter, seeing players group up or fight against each other to find the best stuff all around Tau Ceti 4. But while some were certainly excited about this announcement, especially those already interested in the Marathon series, there was a downside, particularly surrounding how all of this has impacted Destiny over the last couple years. The most active Destiny players were spending a lot of money on this game. From expansions to season passes to the Eververse to dungeon keys, you name it. If it's in the game, it probably costs some amount of money. And with all of the apparent flaws in Destiny's development, players were really beginning to ask, well, where's that money going? It doesn't really feel like $4 billion have been pumped into Destiny alone. If it was, we'd be getting more than one Crucible map every 4 years. So what's going on? Well, it turns out that a lot of that money had been going to these incubation projects. Even some talent was being pulled away from Destiny. Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy were previously the game director and general manager for Destiny 2, but were pulled away to work on Project Payback, which was apparently going to be set in the Destiny universe but was still a separate game. And a ton of the PvP team at Bungie were pulled away from Destiny 2 to work on Marathon, which is why the Crucible has been left out to dry. Not to mention, since Marathon was promised to be a multiplayer extraction shooter, it didn't quite appeal to what fans liked about Destiny. So Destiny players felt like all of this money was going towards something they didn't care about, instead of being funneled back into the game that they were actually playing. I mean, this has got to be a pretty bad management decision, right? Why would they siphon all the money away from the one game that's providing revenue, only to not put it back into that game? Unless, of course, they wanted to artificially boost the studio's value in the early 2020s, so someone like Sony would spend nearly $4 billion on them. Destiny 2 on its own wouldn't be worth that much money, but 5 live service games at once? Now there are some dollar signs. But that's just a theory. Now, the negativity around Marathon's reveal wasn't universal, surely. There was a lot to be interested about when it came to Bungie's next title, but Destiny players did feel quite slighted with this news. Thankfully for them, it was followed by something way more exciting. Because right after Marathon's trailer concluded, audiences were met with a brand new, fully rendered CG trailer featuring Ikora Rey. She's sitting in front of a campfire talking to someone, detailing some of what we've been up to in-game over the last couple years. From the enemies we faced to the unlikely alliances we've forged, the clear statement was that everything we'd done so far in this game was about to lead to one last chapter. But the big reveal was the identity of the person Ikora was talking to. Who exactly would need to be caught up on all of these events?
I wish you could have been there.
Yeah, me too, kiddo. But hey, I'm here now. Wherever the hell here is.
Cayde 6 is back. How? I have no idea, but clearly he's a little bit different, what with the glowing cracks around the Ace of Spades and even the additional glow around his eyes. That wasn't there before. So something is obviously different about Cayde, but it's still him. And he's once again voiced by Nathan Fillion. After swapping him out for Nolan North in Cayde's final expansion Forsaken, his original voice actor was back to tell this next chapter. Though of course, while many fans started to get excited again, there was also a more cynical read of this trailer. You know, it was really starting to become a pattern by this point that whenever Destiny was in trouble, they'd bring out Cayde 6. Now, of course, I think this had to have been in the works before Lightfall came out, but it does fit the pattern. Destiny 1 launched to mixed reception and felt a lot of problems in its first year. Well, Cayde's now an important character in the Taken King to bring in some life. Destiny 2 also launched to mixed reception in a rough as hell first year. Time to kill Cayde in Forsaken for a bit of shock value to get everyone back. Now Lightfall's come out and it's the worst reviewed expansion yet. Time to bring back Cayde for the big finale. But even leaving that aside, this still generated a ton of excitement and a ton of interest. And while there was still almost a year before the final shape would launch, this did promise that players would learn more during Bungie's livestream showcase at the end of August, just like they had for the last 2 expansions. So finally, once August 22nd came around, fans were ready to see Bungie pull the curtain back in a big way for the final shape.
After all these years, we never talked about it. Why I brought you back.
The main pillar for this reveal was, of course, the final shape, coming complete with a new, fully CG reveal trailer showing off that we were going to enter the Traveler, revealing a new destination called the Pale Heart, which was actually name-dropped by the Witness all the way back in its reveal cutscene from the end of the Witch Queen. There were promises of a strictly linear campaign, with a progression of visuals throughout the story that had never been in Destiny before, as you dive deeper into the Pale Heart in pursuit of the Witness before it can enact the final shape. Obviously, we're in for a big time, with promises of new weapons, new gear, even 3 new supers, 1 for each class. But the most exciting part for longtime Destiny players is that everything we knew, everything we had done throughout all these years was finally coming to a head. These characters were going to unite in one last stand. The Vanguard was going to reunite, with Zavala, Ikora, and Cayde standing side by side for the first time in years to take on this threat. The final shape was bound to be big, and this reveal showed that off really well. And with the release date of February 27th confirmed, the countdown began for the ending of the Light and Darkness saga. And many held out hope that somehow Bungie was going to be able to pull it off. With pre-orders now on sale, plenty of players got in on the ground floor, ready and waiting for the Grand Slam finale. In the meantime, now that Season of the Deep had wrapped up, players were launched into the Season of the Witch, which was by and large the best season of the year. There's a lot more going on here as we explore the deeper lore of the Hive. Once again, we're facing off against the armies led by Xivu Arath, who continues to be a threat dangling before us from the shadows. And Eris Morn gets some rather kick-ass moments as she uses cursed magic spells to become a Hive god herself. It might be temporary, but her connection to the Hive gives her unimaginable power through this season's story. Not to mention, she even gets more moments with the Drifter, continuing their seeming flirtatious relationship that many players were beginning to latch onto. It was becoming a really fun dynamic.
But the Hive are not afraid. They are awestruck. They know that I am vengeance, and they have conjured me back with vengeance.
Ooh, sounds like a wild ride.
I seek to subvert the Hive's flawed logic. I may only do so because of what I am, and what I am not. It is a wild ride.
All of this is on a quest to resurrect the Witch Queen Savathun, because as was revealed by Asa last season, apparently Savathun might have a key piece of information to help us pursue the Witness, which kind of highlights the major issue with this year's seasonal stories, because each one feels like a baby step towards the story we actually want to chase. I mean, we communicate with Asa to learn a great deal of information about the Witness, but she can't help us follow it. That help has to come from Savathun. So now this season we've got to go through another mission to help clear out Xivu Arath's forces so that Savathun's ghost has enough confidence to bring Savathun back, which will inevitably lead into another questline before we can actually pursue the Witness. Like, I know the release date of the final shape is a ways away, I understand how the passage of time works, but this drip feeding of the story is getting a little crazy by this point. And the conclusion to the season's story was also a little confusing, since it came in 3 different areas that lacked total clarity. As the story comes to an end, Savathun is finally awakened, only for Eris Morn to kill her again, using her ties to Hive godhood to separate Xivu Arath from her throne world. But in order to truly understand how this happened, you have to go talk to Eris Morn to find out exactly what she did. The cutscene doesn't really make it clear. And then you also needed to read a separate lore entry to learn that once all this was over, Savathun was resurrected permanently, able to roam around the universe freely of her own intent, without Xivu Arath chasing her down. It's a very significant chapter, but the way it's conveyed leaves a bit to be desired here at the end. Thankfully, there was lots more the season had to offer, in 2 major ways. One intentional, one not. The intentional side came with the reprisal of yet another Destiny 1 raid. Following Vault of Glass and King's Fall in the last 2 years, Crota's End from the Dark Below was brought into Destiny 2. Now, Crota's End was considered a joke by many in the Destiny player base, since it was one of the easiest raid experiences. Some even considered it more akin to a strike or thought it would be better suited to be brought back as a dungeon instead of a full-on raid. But Bungie didn't necessarily agree. They had a statement to make with Crota's End, and once the raid launched on September 1st, 2023, Crota got his revenge. With a couple of key differences and alterations, this raid proved to be much more challenging than players expected. Crota was back with a vengeance. You thought he'd be easy to take down? Well, get ready to have your ass handed to you in the longest day 1 race for a reprised raid yet. Once all was said and done, Team Elysium managed to beat the normal mode raid in 3 hours and 13 minutes before completing the challenge mode in 5 hours and 50 minutes. It was a big deal, a big challenge, and a big accomplishment, which even came with another major landmark for the team, because this was Team Elysium's 4th World's First victory, and it also meant they went 3 for 3 on World's First for each reprised raid. Vault of Glass, King's Fall, and Crota's End were all beaten for the first time by the same team. They were definitely the ones to watch now, the ones who could take on these challenges like nobody's business. That was one significant win for Destiny in September of 2023, but it was also the intentional win, because later in the month, players discovered another unintentional glitch. Players discovered that if you cheesed the system just enough when crafting a new weapon on Mars, you could actually combine attributes from 2 different weapons. If you wanted, you could create a machine gun that shot grenades. You could create a fusion rifle that shot rockets. You could create an auto rifle that shot shotgun shells. Any craftable weapon was fair game for this exploit, allowing players to suddenly melt opponents, both during the most difficult challenges like the raids as well as in the Crucible. I mean, imagine going around firing shotgun shells with the range and frequency of a machine gun. You're a lawnmower at that point. Players jumped all over this, marking an event now known as the Craftening, an apocalyptic event that saw players destroying the battlefield in ways that were simply not beatable. Inevitably, Bungie did find a way to patch this out, restoring crafting to how it was supposed to work, but even they said, have some fun with this, which the community took as a green light to go as crazy as possible. Tons of combinations, tons of different moments were held for the weekend. It was a fantastic time. Sometimes all it takes is a big glitch for the player base to jump in and have some of the most fun they've ever experienced. With the release of Crota's End and the events of the Craftening, morale among the player base was doing pretty well. The new season was good. Some of the things within the game were good. The unfortunate reality was, nothing lasts forever. In a year with fraught relations between Bungie and the community, things only managed to get worse. Like, 1,000,000 times worse. Because a major turning point eventually arrived on a day that will live on in infamy for Destiny players. October 30th, 2023.
Just to be upfront with everyone right now, we've got bad news and badder news. And a side of terrible news all around.
This is the day where, rather suddenly, over 100 employees were laid off from Bungie. Reportedly, Bungie had a grand total of 1,200 employees, so it's a rather significant cut to the work staff. Nearly 1/10 of the total company was gone in the blink of an eye. Not just in one department either, practically the entire studio was affected. And these weren't the small unknown names either. Some of these were community managers who had been speaking directly to the player base for years. And in the most devastating turn of events, this also impacted Destiny's music, as Michael Seacrest was fired, and so was Michael Salvatore. The moment people found out that Michael Salvatore was fired, it was like a bomb had dropped in the community. Michael Salvatore had been one of the main voices behind Destiny's music since its inception, but his relationship with Bungie stretches back long before that. He'd been working with them for over 20 years. He and Martin O'Donnell were responsible for creating the epic sounds of the Halo soundtrack dating all the way back to when that series first began. And while Martin O'Donnell was long gone by now, Michael Salvatore kept on with Destiny for every story it told over the last 10 years. And given how much universal praise the music in this game has always gotten, losing this voice was nothing but devastating for fans. It doesn't stop there though, because this also meant that the final shape was gonna get delayed. It was set for release on February 27, 2024, but after this it was pushed all the way back to June 4th. Even Bungie's follow-up game Marathon was delayed from its projected 2024 release to 2025. This meant that Season 23, like Season of the Lost from 2 years ago, was going to be exceedingly long. In fact, it was going to be the single longest season Destiny had ever had, stretching to 7 total months. And since only 3 of those months were planned, the game was going to head into its largest content drought since the seasonal model began. There had been concerns about the final shape already, especially coming off the back of the disappointing release of Lightfall, but this sent people into a panic. What the hell is going on over at Bungie? By all accounts, it's really just a case of pure mismanagement up top. Bungie is not a company that should be so short on cash it has to cut off 1/10 of its workforce. Back when Sony bought Bungie for, again, $3.7 billion, it was part of a promise that layoffs like this wouldn't have to happen. But what we're seeing in the gaming industry is a near total collapse. It's crazy how bad things have gotten over the last couple years. Following COVID, a period of time where lots of people were stuck at home playing more video games, companies saw dollar signs. The market was gonna explode. So much money was gonna be made. Unless, of course, the effects of the pandemic were gonna fade away after a while and people went outside again. As a result, this excessive spending is starting to come back to bite the industry in the ass. Studios are being shut down left and right, layoffs have been occurring almost regularly. 2023 was especially a bad year in terms of layoffs, and Bungie was managing to skate around it until now. And it all comes off the back of the reveal that apparently Lightfall fell short of financial expectations by 45%, and pre-orders for the final shape weren't up to snuff. Morale internally at Bungie was at an all-time low, morale among the player base was at an all-time low, with many even canceling their pre-orders for the final shape in the wake of this news. Whether or not that outrage translated to real-world revenue shifts is a different question, but it did happen. The year is 2023, and video game developer Bungie is in a bit of a bind. Remember that analogy about how the development of this game is like building a plane while it's in midair? The commonly used metaphor that both people within and outside of Bungie had been using for a while? Well, despite thinking we were on a safe descent, the release of Lightfall and especially these layoffs are like if one of the engines got hit with a surface-to-air missile. Maybe this thing can still land with its remaining engines, but it also has just as much ability to crash at the airport. At this point, there really wasn't much left for players to do but either quit the game entirely, which I'm sure many people did, or hold out just long enough for the final shape to see the conclusion of the story they were following. Perhaps by then, it'll be best to leave Destiny 2 behind. But there was of course one final season to tackle before the release of the final shape in June. Right as Season of the Witch came to its full conclusion, there was one significant revelation, one that players had been waiting for a very long time. During the brief moment when Savathun was awakened in the final cutscene, our Guardian discovered a pattern on her wing. Not just any pattern either. This was a pattern that could match with the Wish Wall in the Dreaming City, the one players could visit at the start of the last Wish raid. Before, there were 14 patterns that players could input that would change the raid experience in various ways. But theories sprung that a 15th pattern, a 15th wish, must be out there somewhere. Of course, it never was. The 15th wish just became an urban legend. Until now. After 5 years since the last Wish raid went live, players had discovered the 15th wish. A wish to pursue the witness into the Traveler. Exactly the key we need to head into, well, the endgame. All of this is the centerpiece for what is aptly known as Season of the Wish. This takes us back to the Dreaming City for a story centered around the Awoken. Queen Mara Sov, Petravenge, and Crow all come together for this story. Together we must cast this 15th wish with a Wish Dragon. Too bad they're all dead. In fact, we killed the last one, Riven, during the last Wish raid, so... Thankfully, Wish Dragons, also known as Ahamkaras, are quite special creatures, able to transcend death to some extent. So, Marasov is able to conjure Riven's spirit to cast this wish, which will send us on another quest to retrieve Ahamkara eggs to ensure the future of Riven's species. Only by doing that will she consider opening the gateway to allow us to pursue the witness. The most fun aspect of the season has to be with our central characters, primarily Crow, who, given Aldrin's history with the Wish Dragons and Mara Sov in general, he's confronted with a lot of his past that he's forgotten. But by this point, he's really begun to accept his past. He's accepted Aldrin as part of his story, and has regrown connections with Mara Sov and Petrovenge. Connections that can grow in different ways considering how different Crow is. Even if he starts quoting his old self from time to time.
We'll make you a key. How's that? All we need is the head of a Vex Gate Lord.
Lucky for us, that's familiar territory. I remember how to get in. All we need is the head of a Vex Gate Lord. Kidding.
But there is one final wrinkle that Riven reveals a few weeks into the season. As it turns out, Savathun's wish was for just one person to enter the Traveler behind the Witness. Only one. Mara Sov thought we'd be able to send an army in there, but just one person is all we're gonna get. Which of course begs the ultimate question. Who's gonna go in? As 2024 began, that question hovered over the Destiny player base as they followed along the story. Who was gonna go through the portal and follow the Witness? Well, as Crow says, there's one obvious choice. You. Your Guardian has stopped many things in the past, and of course, since you're the player character, it makes sense that you'd be the one heading in to stop the Witness. But it's also worth noting that you can't do this alone, and if your Guardian is sent through, no one will be able to follow. So, Crow has a different idea.
Let me do it. If I go through the portal, Mara can use our connection to guide everyone through to, well, wherever I end up.
Given the nature of the Awoken and the fact that they're brother and sister, Crow and Mara Sov do share some kind of connection. They can hear each other's heartbeat, so it might be exactly what we need. Crow can head through first, and Mara can use that connection to build a bridge that lets everyone else in after him.
I plant the beacon, and you come and kick the door down.
After the multi-year story that Crow has been on in this game, I think this is a rather perfect way to play his role. He's been on this quest to redeem himself after Aldrin's crimes, a life he doesn't remember living but still wants to atone for. And this is one big chance to fulfill whatever his, well, destiny might be. So after we retrieve all of the Ahamkara eggs, we cast the 15th wish with Riven, and Crow leaps through the portal, beginning his transport to the other side. It's one big step before finally reaching the Grand Slam finale, but it wasn't alone. Eagle-eyed fans who love to read everything were able to catch a glimpse of another small detail. On the lore tab for the exotic ship known as the Unforeseen Consequences, players could read about a conversation Crow had with Mara Sov, where he talked about how he wanted to atone for his past sins, but the one he could never escape from, the one he could never truly make right, was murdering Cayde 6. He specifically says, "I just wish I could tell him I shouldn't have done it." Now, this is about as innocuous a line as any, right? Unless you notice the details that suggest Mara in the scene isn't who she claims to be. She is actually Riven, the Wish Dragon, in disguise. Lore heads in the player base jumped on this almost immediately, because this seemed to explain how Cayde was going to come back. Crow wished to be able to tell Cayde he shouldn't have killed him, and since Wish Dragons twist things out of their intended shape, that means Cayde has been brought back to allow Crow to do just that. There's so much deeper lore stuff hidden in this game, it's crazy, but rarely does a simple lore tab seem to have this much impact on the story itself. Fans now had an idea of how Cayde was going to return, answering long-standing questions they've had since the initial teaser. But of course, there was going to be a long time to wait before they'd see that play out. The main story of Season of the Wish had wrapped up, but the final shape was still several months away. What were players going to do to keep up interest? Well, Guardian games were back once again, which also came with an all-new personal vehicle that Guardians could equip. You didn't have to ride around on a Sparrow anymore, you could also take on the new Skimmer. It's a flying snowboard, essentially. A hoverboard from Back to the Future 2, perhaps? Fun stuff all around. But there honestly wasn't much for players to tackle in the early months of the year. The biggest news in the first couple months was the fact that Joe Blackburn was going to step down from the game director position after the final shape launched. Many people had criticized some of the titles Joe Blackburn had worked on, namely Lightfall, but people really quite liked him in that spot too. He often communicated directly with the player base, releasing the occasional video for ultimate transparency on what was going on with the game behind the scenes. In one infamous moment, he even live-streamed himself playing the game so he had a first-hand account of some of the issues players were facing, and he also got absolutely destroyed by an overload Minotaur. But now he was stepping down, leaving Tyson Green to take over his position as the game director going forward. Tyson Green is one of the longest-lasting employees at Bungie, with his tenure stretching all the way back to the 90s with the development of Myth 2. Since then, he'd worked on practically every title Bungie had created, so he had more than enough of a resume with the studio to take the reins on Destiny after the final shape. But finally, everything eventually led into one last push towards the next expansion's release. Because after months of near radio silence from Bungie, players were able to learn a ton about the next chapter on April 9th, when Bungie revealed a full 20-minute showcase for the final shape, which began with the first concrete reveal of gameplay. Whoa. Hold on, that was ability spam the likes of which we have never seen. This Hunter character is seamlessly using a Strand grapple, a Stasis melee, a Solar class ability, and an Arc super without having to enter a menu to change subclasses? What? After building up our Guardians for the past 10 years with different abilities and elements to tame, Bungie revealed that we were going to be able to combine them. This was going to introduce Prismatic, a subclass that allows you to mix and match abilities from the 5 other subclasses to become a demon on the battlefield. Solar, Void, Arc, Stasis, Strand, all of them could be mixed and matched with Prismatic in ways that could break the game. Balancing was out the window. If you wanted to create the most destructive build in the universe, this was your chance. Not to mention, there were new exotic class items that could combine attributes and perks from any other exotic in the game, essentially taking the glitch that created the Craftening back in the fall and making it official. And there was a new group of enemies for players to take on at the same time. So you have new abilities, you can combine perks, all to fight off against the first new batch of enemies Destiny's seen in years. This reveal was monumental. The morale among the player base did a complete 180 within minutes of this stuff getting shown off. For the first time since October, players were excited for the future of this game. They were pumped to see where this could go. Bungie was cooking. And it was all capped off with a full gameplay trailer not only showing off more crazy combinations with Prismatic, but even ending with a phrase that ties back to the earliest days of this game's history. Back in the Vault of Glass raid for Destiny 1, players were met with the simple yet effective phrase, "Guardians make their own fate." And now that phrase has come back to get players pumped up for the grand finale. And even though the final shape is still 2 months away, players were able to jump into the game to tackle new activities right now. Because on the same day as this showcase, Bungie launched Into the Light, an all-new update that would reinvigorate players heading into this final stretch. A bunch of old weapons were brought back from the game's past. There were even some new activities. Pantheon allowed players to revisit various raid bosses from across Destiny's history. These weren't new encounters, but with each week that went by, the challenge got just a bit harder. So it became a new mountain to climb for hardcore players. Then you had Onslaught, a horde mode hosted by Lord Shaxx, where you'd fight off waves upon waves waves of enemies, a type of game mode that Bungie has implemented in this game at varying scales before, but has always been highly sought after by the player base. There were also 3 new Crucible maps added. After years of continuing neglect, PvP fans had something to chew on here, which was great. There were also a couple of quality of life upgrades with Into the Light, the primary one being the complete reversal of weapon sunsetting. Sunsetting had been afflicting the game for years. Certain older weapons were artificially capped to keep the meta from becoming stale, forcing players to take on the newer gear. But here, that cap was removed on everything. It didn't matter if you were rocking Year 1 gear or Year 6 gear. All of it could be leveled up to the power cap. The Final Shape Developer Showcase and Into the Light changed the tune among the Destiny player base in a big way. It was just enough to respark interest and get players excited once again heading into the finale. Even as an effort to get new players on board and even get old players to come back, a number of previous expansions were made free to play in the weeks before the next launch. Shadowkeep, Beyond Light, and the Witch Queen were now free for everyone. Shadowkeep and Beyond Light would even remain free once the Final Shape came out. Of course, they're still charging money for Lightfall, which I'm not too sure about that. But players could jump into this game with a very low barrier to entry to catch up in time for the finale. Promotion for which was only skyrocketing in these last 2 months. A new trailer released showcasing the inside of the Traveler, revealing different aspects of the new destination, the Pale Heart. From its brightly colored greenery to the darker corners laid closer to the location of the Witness. It was the greatest look players had gotten yet into what this destination would look like, yet still it felt like there were a million other corners that players would have to explore on their own once the expansion arrived.
A final shape is coming.
In the final push, Bungie released not 1 but 2 VDocs detailing some of the behind-the-scenes teases for this expansion. From the gameplay to the new supers, to the prismatic subclass and how things would be combined as you kickstart the new campaign, the whole design of the story and the location was built to reflect that this was the culmination of everything players had done in this game so far.
We want to tell a story that makes you, the player, feel like all of that time that you invested, we saw you, and we want to give you the experience that you've been waiting for.
And of course, in the final weeks, the last leg of the story for Season of the Wish finally managed to come through. In one last story mission, we actually returned to the Black Garden for a full circle kind of moment. The Black Garden was the major location that closed out the campaign for vanilla Destiny 1. Now, with the 10 years of additional context coming in after that, we return to that location and learn a bit more about what the Black Heart specifically was trying to be. Apparently, it was a Vex simulation trying to recreate the Veil. It wasn't quite the heart of the darkness as we understood it back then. It was still a threat, but a smaller piece to this larger puzzle. But of course, the real interesting part of the story involved following up with Crow. It had been 5 months now since he leaped through that portal, and after all of the delays, we now finally get to see where he winds up. In one final cutscene, we see Crow enter the Traveler, enter the Pale Heart. He's made it to the other side, only to be immediately shot at. Like, there's no time to waste. Suddenly there's another guy shooting at him. It's crazy. But who could that possibly be? Who else could be inside the Pale Heart? Well, it's Cayde 6, of course, creating a scene that mirrors his final moments staring up at Uldren Sov.
You died.
So did you.
What a way to set the stage for the final shape. Crow is inside the Pale Heart with Cayde, and with Osiris's help, we've managed to cement the connection between Crow and Mara Sov just enough for others to follow and take on the Witness once and for all. The last push is upon us, Guardians. The final shape looms. And now, in the last stretch, the last days leading up to the release of this expansion, the entire promotional cycle was capped off with the immense launch trailer.
Witness nears the final shape.
The This provided the best look yet at the story this expansion was set to tell, featuring glorious pre-rendered cinematics, some incredible looks at the location and some of our characters. We even get to hear Keith David's voice for Commander Zavala for one of the first times. We heard it briefly during the V-Docs before this, but this was a better sound within some amount of context.
One last step. Together. Into the end.
For those heavily interested in the lore, this also saw the reveal of the Veiled statues, but not as statues. These things had been appearing across the game ever since Shadowkeep in 2019, leaving people to ask a ton of questions about what they could be. Now, it's clear that during this expansion we're actually going to see the beings that the Veiled statues represent. We're now going to find out exactly what they are. All of which was set to the haunting sounds of Everything I Wanted by Billie Eilish, which brings a fantastic sense of foreboding terror to this trailer. But as is common with practically every Destiny trailer that's used a licensed song, Bungie wasn't able to use it forever. In fact, in many circumstances, Bungie has had to re-upload trailers with different music to circumvent losing the rights to these songs. And the launch trailer for the final shape was no different, with a new version posted 1 year after the original. But what it really showed off is just how much the music impacted how the trailer felt and how it worked. With the new, slightly more generic trailer music, the whole thing might sound alright, but it doesn't carry the same punch. Here's how the trailer sounds in the 2025 re-upload. And here's how it sounded back when it first came out in 2024.
Got everything. Why don't you
I don't know about you, but I think the one with the Billie Eilish song sounds and feels a lot better. Of course, these flashy trailers and marketing push managed to get plenty of people excited for the final shape. After years of build-up, it had all come to this. Players who'd been following along every step of the way were gearing up for the end. Players who had maybe stopped playing for a while were brought back to finish out this story. On the community side of things, everything was bustling to a new degree as everyone prepared for this expansion. My Name is Bife even released a 10-hour lore video about the complete timeline of the Destiny universe leading up to the final shape, compiling everything we know into one comprehensive video. But while excitement for some was at an all-time high, there was also, more than any expansion before this, a tangible sense of dread. After Lightfall disappointed, after people had grown more critical of the game than ever, after 1/10 of Bungie's employees were laid off, there was plenty of reason to think that this expansion might drop the ball in a big way. The reputation of the game could careen off of a cliff, and the years players have spent within it could have been for nothing. Expectations were very different this time. People hoped for the best, for something akin to the Witch Queen or even better, but prepared for the possibility that this might not be what they were hoping for. In any event, once the expansion was released, they could pick it up in a few different ways. You could of course pick up the standard edition, which, like Lightfall before it, was priced at $50. You could pick up the deluxe edition for $100, which came with the annual pass granting access to the 3 inbound episodes in the next year. Then you could pick up the collector's edition for $175, containing some real, actual pieces of merchandise, including a whole miniature model of the tower. The original tower from Destiny 1 at that. Once you picked up any of those, it was time to sit down and get ready for the final shape's launch. The clock had turned to June 4th, 2024, as players booted up the game ready to take on this final chapter, and they couldn't play it. Probably due to the increased traffic, Bungie had a lot of server errors the day the final shape launched, so a great many players were unable to get access. This was slowly resolved over the first 24 hours, but it caused a lot of frustration among fans. I mean, they said it would launch on June 4th, and now that it's June 4th, I can't play? Come on, Bungie. Even among players that could get in, they faced a number of issues, like certain cutscenes not loading properly, meaning people were missing key parts of the story and had to catch up somehow online. But of course, the day one issues would eventually be resolved, and players were able to get in to experience the final chapter of the Light and Darkness saga. I still remember back in 2014 when Bungie said that the initial release of Destiny was only the beginning of a 10-year journey. And while many said there was no way that game could have survived for 10 years in the state it was in, somehow it managed to persist. With a legion of updates, new campaigns, expansions, gear, loot, power cap increases, a whole new game at one point, a decade had now gone by and Destiny was still around to tell its story. 10 years ago, our ghost woke us up in the Cosmodrome. We had no knowledge of the world we inhabited to a frustrating degree. We had to read cards online, we had to find My Name is Bife videos to teach us what we were missing. But over time, we discovered more about this universe, and learned the truth about the threat we were all set to face. Now, the witness is within the Traveler, seeking to enact the final shape, and it's our job to head in after them and shut it down for good. The clock is now turned to June 4th, 2024. So get ready for Transmat Guardians, because it's time to complete the saga. It is time to become legend. We've got no time to waste. With the connection between Crow and Mara Sov established, Commander Zavala, Ikora Rey, and our Guardian now set off to head inside the Traveler to stop the Witness. And as a show of how this expansion takes place exclusively within the Traveler, your ship gets destroyed right up front. The game is specifically designed to keep you within the walls of the story for as long as it runs, though the illusion of our ship getting destroyed vanishes pretty quickly once you go to orbit and still have your ship. But if we ignore those brief moments, we can see how linear this campaign experience really is, far more linear than anything this game has done before. This is a journey into the Pale Heart, a new destination within the Traveler. It begins with this purple tunnel area with structures peering around from every corner. We see places familiar from the EDZ, we see one of the colony ships from the Cosmodrome. There's tons of crazy stuff. But things only get crazier once we fully cross the threshold and enter the Pale Heart during the first mission. Destiny has always had stellar art direction. Every destination from across this game's lifespan, dating back to the first locations you visited in Destiny 1, have been fantastic. But the Pale Heart, I think, is on a level all to itself. This features probably the best art direction in the entire game. It's the best looking location for a myriad of reasons. When you first arrive, it is bright, it is green, it is colorful. You get this nice money shot of the triangular portal you see upon entrance. It's awe-inspiring. Beyond that, it's also reusing assets from previous campaigns, because the inside of the Traveler is revealed to, in some ways, be a reflection of the outside. So we see locations from our memories, like the Destiny 1 tower and even the Cosmodrome. But it's all twisted. It's not a one-to-one recreation. Sure, we might be seeing that highway leading into the Cosmodrome, but here that highway is on the side of a mountain, vertically. Then you get trees growing into the shapes of faces, you have giant ghost shells practically everywhere. The deeper you go, the crazier things get. Throughout the story, you'll enter these caverns, with areas that have been twisted and warped by the Witness. We see faces emerging from the walls, cubic shapes everywhere, and lots of hands. I hope you're ready for that, because there are hands everywhere going on here. All as a result of the Witness's efforts to use the light within the Traveler to enact the final shape. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, as just about everyone was wondering in the months and years leading up to this expansion, what the hell is the final shape? We started to get some insights during the last couple seasons, but this is where we get our true explanation to what the Witness is after. We even see it during the opening cutscene. The final shape is essentially the universe rendered into a perfect stillness. Everything frozen in time, molded into one shape. By the Witness's will, everyone will be frozen in their perfect ending, the ending it thinks they deserve. To the Witness, the way to find meaning in the universe is stillness. Everything will be perfect once it's frozen for the rest of eternity. This is its salvation that it promises everyone who comes across it. This is its ultimate end goal. Taco Tuesday from the Lego Movie. But of course, I can't be the only one who doesn't want to be rendered into weird geometry. I mean, I'm good not looking like these guys. I kinda like moving around, and so does everyone else in this game. So, it's our job to reach the Witness, find a way to take it down, and stop it from enacting the final shape. And to do so, we are of course joined by our longtime allies Ikora Rey, Zavala, and Crow, but also an old friend with Cade 6.
Cade. How long has it been?
A lifetime.
It is a joy to have Cade back in this expansion, and I can also thankfully say that he's not over the top when it comes to his humor. In vanilla Destiny 2 and Forsaken, he was going a bit too crazy with the jokes that were more misses than hits. But here he goes back to his more subdued personality. He's still the same competent hunter vanguard who's here to see this mission through. But don't let that spook you too much, he still brings out some killer jokes. And since they're less over the top and more spread out, they wind up hitting quite a bit harder.
It's real good to see you two. I finally have someone to talk to about Crow's stupid haircut.
But the crux of his character here is, of course, the fact that he's been brought back. He did die in Forsaken, that hasn't been retconned. In fact, Cade has all of his memories from that time. He's still the same guy, as if he woke up almost immediately after his death in that expansion. Only this time he's forged entirely of the light, just like ghosts are. And eventually, Crow reveals to him that it was actually by his wish that Cade was able to come back, confirming both to them and to us that that is what brought Cade back from the brink. Of course, Crow's explanation is a bit different than what players read in that one lore tab, but the bottom line is still true. Crow's wish brought Cade back to life. But the interesting thing is, you can tell that given the writing and Nathan Fillion's performance, Cade is actually quite uncomfortable with the idea that he's been brought back. He thought his story was over, for one thing, but also when he died, he was able to reunite with his ghost Sundance in the afterlife.
Like we were two cards shuffled back into our deck, whole again.
Cade doesn't actually want to be back. He knows what's at stake and will help out, but as long as he's back here with us and not with Sundance, a part of him feels like it's forever missing. There's a lot of emphasis placed in this story on the relationship between Guardians and their ghosts. It starts with Cade and Sundance, but even extends to us and our ghost. He's been our companion since this whole adventure started when he was still voiced by Peter Dinklage. He's been by our side, reviving us whenever we fall off of a cliff and die a horrible death. In fact, our ghost is actually the main vendor in the Pale Heart. He's the character we talk to the most during the story in between the larger missions. But he's also even more impacted by the Witness's tampering with the Traveler than we are. Throughout the story, the Witness will make some kind of breakthrough, and it'll hurt our ghost. So while our ghost starts the story as pristine and perfect as ever, he begins to crack and break the longer the story goes. Don't fret, because even with the damage, your ghost can still do everything he's supposed to. When you die, he's there to revive you. Which is great because this expansion sees us fighting every single enemy type from across Destiny's history. Now, many people, myself included, have criticized this game for reusing the same enemies over and over and over again. I think the reason I'm not bothered by that here is twofold. For one thing, it's just kinda to be expected at this point, which might itself be a sad commentary about lowered expectations. But for another thing, it's the grand finale. Of course we're gonna do a greatest hits montage. We got the Fallen, we got the Hive, we got the Vex, the Cabal, the Taken make a startling appearance here, the Scorn have a bit of a presence, and on top of all of them, we now have the new enemy type, the Dread. While before we saw Hive enemies that could wield the light, and some of them are back in this expansion too, the Dread are beings that can wield the darkness. You've got the Weaver, the basic foot soldier who wields strand powers. If they get sights on you, they can rope you up and yank you towards them to bring you into the middle of the fray. Attendants are very similar in terms of design, only they use stasis. so they can hit you with ice powers. You've got the Grim, these floating bat-like creatures that can scream at you to temporarily take away your abilities for a few seconds. Husks are the guys who will charge at you with melee attacks. They've got these big blades that they can just slash you with. Be sure to hit their precision weak spot, otherwise they'll deploy a Geist which will fly towards you and explode in your face. Then you've got the bigger characters, the Subjugators, featuring 2 different types, Harbingers who wield Strand, and Omens who wield Stasis. These are kind of the mini-bosses of the campaign. They're not quite as terrifying as Tormentors, but that's not too bad because Tormentors also make an appearance here after being introduced in Lightfall. But among all of these enemies, sometimes you'll encounter guys who have these colorful shields overlaid on top of them. Shooting them will do you absolutely no good. These shields are immune to nearly all attacks. Thankfully, as introduced towards the end of the first level of the campaign, you find a way to cut through them, because this is where you're introduced to the all-new subclass, Prismatic. A subclass that is able to combine grenades, melees, supers, aspects, and fragments from across all 5 of the previous classes. You want an arc super, a void grenade, and a stasis melee? Go for it. You want to go for a stasis grenade and a solar melee? Be my guest. Combining different abilities like this is awesome. Players have been consistently switching between the various subclasses before, toggling between whichever worked best for a given mission or raid. But now, a lot of these abilities are in one place, and they're a blast to play around with. Better yet, once this subclass is unlocked for the first time, you just have it. It is fully unlocked from the get-go. No doling it out over the course of the campaign like in Beyond Light and Lightfall. Prismatic is here and you get to play with it the whole time. And it also comes with a new meter below your supercharge meter. It expands in 2 directions, one on the light, the other on the darkness. For every hit you get with a light or darkness fused ability or weapon, these meters will charge. Light abilities and weapons charge the light meter, darkness weapons and abilities charge the darkness meter. So you want to have a healthy balance of both in order to charge up the meter fully. The whole point of Prismatic is that it's you finally gaining the ability to wield light and darkness simultaneously to become even more powerful than before. Because once this meter is filled, you have the ability to transcend. With this ability activated, you can cut through those colorful shields like paper. You become even stronger on the battlefield, with a new grenade to boot. The campaign also provides these prismatic wells during key moments, so whenever you come across a prismatic shielded enemy, you can instantly charge your meter during these heated moments so you don't have to grind too much to charge it up manually. But even on top of Prismatic, each class gets one new super to go along with it, allowing Guardians to accept new gifts from the Traveler to help them along. Hunters get the Storm's Edge super for their Arc subclass, which allows them to create a dagger of arc energy they can throw, then instantly teleport to wherever it lands to strike with a big wave attack. Titans get the Twilight Arsenal super for their Void subclass, allowing them to create an enormous void axe they can throw into the battlefield. But even after throwing it, it doesn't immediately go away. Both they and any other Guardians around can pick up the axe and use it as a melee weapon temporarily. Now that's cool. And finally, Warlocks get the Song of Flame super for their Solar subclass, which is very similar to the Radiant super from Destiny 1, allowing them to charge up all of their abilities and weapons to become a monster on the battlefield. It even drastically shrinks the cooldown on grenades and melees. But as mentioned, one thing that makes this expansion quite different than any previous Destiny campaign is that it is entirely linear. Previous campaigns will open up new worlds as patrol spaces, letting you go off the beaten path at any time before returning to the main story. Not to mention all the times you'll spawn into the same area and traverse the same places before jumping into something new. But the final shape is completely different. We spend this campaign inching our way closer and closer to the Witness's location. For the entire campaign, we can see its monolith in the distance, and the longer we play, the closer we get. Meanwhile, the doorway we entered gets further and further away. The safety of the outside world drifts more out of our reach with each passing moment. But this also manages to impact how the entire world is designed. Things might start off bright and green and colorful, the true reflection of what the Traveler is capable of, but as we draw closer to the Witness, everything starts to become more gray. Things begin to decay and rot. We lose the greens and blues in favor of browns and reds. Before we enter the last phase, pyramid architecture. During the strike Liminality, which is baked directly into the campaign, we explore architecture based on the Witness's homeworld, where it came from, where the precursors came from. But even this architecture, which was already alien and monolithic, has been twisted and molded in new ways, with new corners we have to explore. One level even sees us climbing up this steep cliff face as we approach the Witness, which is actually one of the most fun bits of level design this game's ever done. It's not alone either. The level design here, much like the Witch Queen, is taken up to a whole new level. While there's lots of shooting bad guys, you have to be paying attention during key moments to solve puzzles and open up the continuing pathways so you can keep shooting bad guys. For example, you can sometimes come across a closed pathway that you need to follow. In order to open it up, you have to pick the right rune, these weird symbols hovering before it. So a boss will appear, and upon killing them, they'll drop one of these runes, letting you know which one to pick to proceed. Sometimes you'll even get two bosses who drop two different runes, so you have to pick both to proceed. At other points, you get your hands on the shield relic called the Aegis, something many Destiny players will be familiar with because it's existed in the game since all the way back in the Vault of Glass raid. Here, it's generated by the Traveler itself to help you fight off against bad guys. You can hit guys with it, you can slam it down, you can create a bubble shield that moves with you, but it's also helpful against some bosses with complete immunity shields. The kind of shield you can't shoot through. With the Aegis, you can charge up a super attack and blast a projectile at them to take the shield down. After that, you can go wild. Later, you'll sometimes find these rooms filled with darkness energy. Darkness that will quite literally eat away at your health until you die. So what you gotta do is get up close to one of these orbs around the area and shoot it. That way you get a shield of darkness. But be aware, it only lasts for 45 seconds. So while you're in the danger zone, be on the lookout for more of these orbs to reset the clock to stay alive for as long as possible. These mostly come in individual moments. One bit has you solve runes, another bit has you use the Aegis, another bit has you going into a darkness corridor. But what this expansion does that I think is really fun, and something the Witch Queen never quite did, is that towards the end of the campaign, these puzzles start to combine into a much larger encounter. This is the kind of stuff raid players had seen forever, and while this certainly isn't as intricate as a raid encounter, it's very new for the campaign experience. The one encounter that really stands out to me is the one involving this giant Taken Ogre. The goal is simple: kill the giant Taken Ogre. The problem is he's got an immunity shield, so you can't just shoot it. Instead, you have to take down these Taken bubbles on either side, alongside the enemies surrounding them. They, of course, can only be taken down when you fully charged your prismatic meter, so watch out for rifts in the ground so you can immediately transcend. After killing them, you'll be able to enter a portal to a secondary area, an area consumed by darkness energy, so you'll have to find these orbs to gain a shield for yourself. You journey here to kill these two giant night bosses. Each one will drop a rune. Upon returning to the main area, you have to match the runes they drop to the ones out here on the map. This will then give you an Aegis which you can use to take down the ogre's shield and go wild. But be aware, once you get the ogre down to half health, their shield comes back and you have to repeat the process all over again. Also, this is a darkness zone, so your ghost can't resurrect you. If you die, you have to start over. It's one of the most involved bosses that's ever been in a campaign level for Destiny. I'm sure it might not hold a candle to other boss fights out there in the wide array of great bosses in video games, but it's a clear step above what Destiny had been doing in its campaigns up to this point. The only encounter it doesn't surpass is the final boss fight against Savathun in The Witch Queen. Now, not only is the gameplay here a cut above what Destiny's done before, so is the story, because there's a lot of meat to this story. It's incredibly personal as well, more personal than any previous story in this game, because as a concluding chapter to this whole saga, we spend a lot of time with some of the major characters. As mentioned, Cade and Crow get plenty of moments, quiet moments at that, where they get to talk things over. That's great. But the character that gets the most play here is undoubtedly Zavala. Keith David has some impossible shoes to fill in voicing this character, and I do appreciate that they got him for his voice, not someone who could do a Lance Reddick impression. Zavala sounds different as a result, and it's unfortunate that Lance Reddick couldn't see this through to the end, but given the circumstances, this is the best outcome, and the weight and gravitas Keith David is able to bring to this character does him a lot of justice.
I don't know how you're here, but...
Yeah, me too, big guy. Me too.
But this is the darkest chapter in Zavala's story, building off of the tragic history we've learned across the seasons. Mainly, his backstory with his wife Sophia and his son Hakim is an important fixture here. Now, you can certainly criticize this expansion for being built too much from the seasonal material, especially because none of that is in the game anymore. So anyone jumping into this expansion after having been away for a while isn't going to know what any of this means. But it's also worth noting that since this is the grand finale, that does earn it a bit of leeway in this department. This is a story built for people who've been following along, for people heavily invested. It's unfortunate that there's such a barrier to entry for everyone else not already invested, but that's more a problem with how Bungie has told this story at large, not necessarily with this expansion on its own. Here, Zavala is being tempted by the Witness. As part of the final shape, the Witness is offering Zavala his perfect ending, the return of his wife and son, frozen in time for the rest of eternity. Zavala is strong-willed enough to resist that temptation, but after devoting his life to the Traveler, he starts to wonder, what has it offered him in return? He knows to resist the Witness, but darkness is offering him something the Traveler never did. All of his experiences as a Lightbearer have been about pain. Losing Hakim, losing Sophia, losing Amanda Holiday, he's very vulnerable right now, and everyone knows it. But he might also have the answers they seek, because he's hearing voices from the darkness, voices that may hold the key to stopping the Witness. But no one else really believes him, thinking there are other ways to potentially uncover the secret to destroying the Witness. Since Zavala's pain has been taking over across this story, he's near suicidal, and he finally cuts loose, leaving the others behind to go it alone. He even leaves his ghost, Tarj, behind. Once again, the story places emphasis on the connection Guardians share with their ghosts, as we spend a bit of time with Tarj for the first time ever, I think. You know, the Commander is not able to do what he does without his closest companion, someone who's been there with him the entire time.
I know. I loved them too.
But as a result of Zavala's quest to go it alone to try and fend off the Witness in a suicide attempt to figure everything out, the Witness gets to him first. And in one startling moment as Tarj is trying to save Zavala from the Witness, this happens. After everything Zavala's been through, this is his darkest moment, because his closest, lifelong companion is dead, and he is left disconnected from the light. He is now a mortal man like everyone else. But as tragic and sad as that might be, his efforts did give us the breakthrough we needed in regards to the Witness, and they also helped reveal one of the longest-lasting mysteries in this game, because this is where we finally discover the truth behind the veiled statues. The Witness is made up of billions of different people. The collective population of the precursor species lives as one entity. These statues represent singular people within that larger entity. But not just any people, no. These are dissenters. Among the billions within the Witness's mind, some have disagreed with the larger consciousness. As punishment, the Witness imprisoned these voices into these statues. And since they know the Witness more intimately than anyone else possibly could, they're able to give us the one clue that can stop them.
What was made can be unmade.
Meet us where we destroyed ourselves.
Since the Witness is made up of billions of different consciousnesses, the way we can stop them is to return to the location the Witness was created, or at least a version that has been built within the Traveler, fully embrace the darkness to reach within and destroy these voices one by one. Only by doing that can we whittle down the Witness to a point where we can finally destroy them. Which leads into the final mission of the campaign, Iconoclasm. Which, since it includes that one Taken Ogre boss fight that I mentioned, as well as a few other major encounters, is the single hardest mission in a Destiny campaign yet. I mean, there have been some difficult missions before, some of which were like, stupid difficult. There are a couple Destiny 1 missions that are hard in a way where they're just broken. This, however, is challenging in a way that's beatable. It's challenging in a way that makes it tough, but not in a way that makes it frustrating or too punishing. Which is why I think this might be my single favorite campaign level ever created for Destiny, at least on normal difficulty, because like the Witch Queen and Lightfall before it, the final shape launched with the ability to take on the campaign on Legendary. And for players attempting this campaign on Legendary for the first time, they were met with an exceptional challenge here. So much so that many players decided to change difficulty down to normal so they could beat it. I decided to give this mission a whirl on Legendary. Of course, it's not a first-time experience since I've played the mission before, and I was able to prepare with simple but effective build crafting for my character. But I can assure you, it is no joke. This is a tough mission on Legendary. The biggest challenges are nothing to sneeze at as you make it through from one encounter to the next. I was able to beat it, but it's not for everyone. It is unrelenting, it is challenging, and properly so, since this is our very first face-to-face confrontation with the Witness. It all leads to this enormous final encounter with tons of enemies, a handful of mechanics that you gotta be paying attention to, even some ticking clocks. Not to mention, the Witness itself is throwing a bunch of these big shards at you, so you want to stay away from it or else you'll be absolutely destroyed by its attack, which is no fun. But by accomplishing the tasks within this encounter, you are presented with a sword. Not just any sword, a sword created by the Traveler. With it, you must embrace the darkness and enter the Witness's consciousness. There, you can destroy one of these statues, wounding the Witness from within. There are 3 statues to destroy here, which makes for 3 rounds of gameplay that you have to accomplish. Thankfully, the 3rd round is much easier since the game almost immediately gives you a sword, and some of your friends are here. Zavala, Ikora, Crow, and Cade. They're all here to help. So go in and destroy the 3rd statue.
We cut you out!
Alright, well done. Statues down, game over, right? Well, not exactly. The Witness is certainly wounded by your efforts, but that just makes it angry. It kicks you out, forcing you to flee with your life alongside everyone else. It's an intense moment as the Witness's 1,000 arms reach out, trying to grab and crush our heroes one by one. But by the skin of their teeth, all of these characters manage to escape unscathed and alive. The only problem is, the Witness remains standing tall, ready to enact its plan. And that is game over. Okay, hold on. It's actually not quite the end. I mean, it's kinda the end, but it's not the end. This is where the campaign hits a built-in hiatus. You've wounded the Witness, but it still stands strong. Hell, our Ghost is now more damaged than ever. It's really taken a beating as a result of this campaign. So, in order to strike back, you'll have to regroup and find another way in. Thankfully, backup has arrived. Marasov is here with the Helm, the seasonal ship, alongside Keitel's Cabal forces, Mizrax's House of Light, and a guardian named Micah 10, a character with more connection to the Traveler than ever before. Someone with a direct link that'll help us in the next leg of this fight. This opens up the Pale Heart as the new patrol space for you to embark on. You're joined by other guardians as you unlock the remaining prismatic abilities. You know, every aspect, every fragment, every melee and grenade, made, you can find them across the Pale Heart. There's also a new progression system built into the Pale Heart destination called Pathfinder, which is this tree of objectives that you can follow, complete with better and better rewards as you proceed to the top. The power cap has raised from 1800 all the way to 1990, and behind it, the power floor was increased to 1900. But of course, through Pinnacle gear as well as the seasonal artifact, you can jump even beyond the 1990 power cap and reach above 2000, which is crazy. All in all, you have about 100 points to work with, the first 50 of which are pretty standard, the next 50 require a bit of a grind. And of course, there are 2 major story quests that you can take on to help gear yourself up. One of them, called Wildcard, sees you team up with Crow and Cade. Together you help to clean up some of the mess within the Pale Heart. But what this also gives is some fun moments between those 2 characters. Not only is there a flashy CG cutscene featuring the 2 working together in a really cool way, blasting mini-screebs away, but Cade also offers Crow an all-new cloak. Not just any cloak either, Cade is offering Crow the position of the new Hunter Vanguard.
But you're the Hunter Vanguard.
Not anymore. Too much paperwork.
Crow has spent his entire journey through this story trying to atone for the sins of his past life. He's managed to make up for a lot, but he still had that one tick against his resume. Now, through the extraordinary circumstances of this expansion, he is finally able to make good on the one thing he never thought he could. He and Cade are now on good terms. That last sin has been atoned, and Crow is left to make an important decision. Will he become the new Hunter Vanguard? The other quest players can take on is called Destined Heroes, following up some of our other characters like Zavala, who takes on some much-needed advice from Keitel to become stronger even after the loss of his ghost. At the same time, Savathun makes a comeback. She's still as treacherous and cunning as ever, but we also share a common enemy. As a result, Savathun, despite being one of the greatest enemies we've ever faced, is going to join forces with us temporarily to help stop the Witness. That's pretty cool. She's not even the only Hive Lightbearer on our side, because the campaign saw us meet a new character named Luzaku, a Lightbearer wizard who's going to join us heading into the final stand. And ultimately, completing this entire questline will reward you with the all-new exotic sword called Ergo Sum. Bungie has commonly had some Latin phrases mixed into this game, dating back years before Destiny even came out with the phrase per audacia ad astra. Here, ergo sum is part of the larger phrase cogito ergo sum, which translates to I think, therefore I am. If that wasn't cool enough though, this sword also has some real significance in terms of the long-standing Destiny lore. If we turn the clock way back to Season of Dawn back in 2019, you might remember that we were able to journey through the corridors of time. And while we were there, we were able to view our very own grave from some moment far off in the future. Somewhere down the road, we are going to die, and it's going to be permanent that time. That grave was adorned with a sword, and if you'll notice, Ergo Sum is that sword. So many players began to speculate. Could this be it? Is this how the story ends? Our Guardian now has the sword that marked our grave. Are we about to die with it? I guess it's time to find out. Because after a few days of grinding across the Pale Heart, a plan has been formed that might ensure victory. It is time to storm the Witness's monolith and end this once and for all. It's now time for the raid. On June 7th, just 3 days after the launch of this new expansion, players could now take on Salvation's Edge. This caused a race to World's First like never before, as players were eager to get a second chance to take down the Witness. Expectations were sky high after Root of Nightmares provided nothing but disappointment last year. For the final raid in this saga, players were hoping for the greatest challenge Bungie could ever offer. Be careful what you wish for, because you got it. Salvation's Edge was without a doubt the most challenging Day 1 experience in Destiny history. It was enormously difficult for players, with tons of the most intricate mechanics, the toughest bosses, and the most complex puzzles they'd ever seen. The first encounter alone took 2 hours for the first team to beat, which is nearly as long as the entirety of Root of Nightmares last year. It was crazy. Salvation's Edge demanded perfection, because everything was timed. For each encounter, the clock was counting down down towards the final shape. You must stop each event to prevent the end of the universe. If you fail, your team wipes and you gotta try again. The art direction was on another level this time as well, alongside the lore side of things, because the entire thing takes place within the monolith, this giant structure that we've been approaching through the entire campaign. You rise up higher and higher through its structure to reach the top and face down the witness. But you'll soon start to notice that the structure itself is actually connected to the witness. Which means we're not just fighting through a big monolithic building, this building is the witness. The final raid is built entirely around this being in its largest form. As players discovered this, they really started freaking out. I mean, that's crazy. The whole raid is the witness. That's so awesome. Competition was incredibly fierce this time as well. Ever since the introduction of a physical champion's belt, the competition during World's First races has skyrocketed. Spies are seen jumping from team to gain an edge. People are scouting, people are learning from other teams, and as a result, teams were hiding things. Before, it was just comms chatter. You know, people don't need to hear you deliberate on an encounter. But now, some teams were going as far as to hide their entire screen so no one could see or hear what they were doing, which made the viewing experience remarkably bad. I mean, the competition is great, but some audiences are definitely interested to see what the raid actually looks like. I guess we gotta zoom into Datto's glasses to see the reflection. Maybe then we'll see what's happening. This was especially true during the fourth encounter of the raid, Verity, which was the puzzle encounter that stopped so many teams right in their tracks. This encounter alone took teams 10 hours to figure out. People watching would go to sleep, only to wake up in the morning to see that, hey, they're still on this encounter. Once people figured out how it worked, it became significantly easier, but before that it took a while for the first team to get through. But eventually, after several hours, the first team, known as Parabellum, were able to beat Verity and make their way towards the fifth and final encounter. They were the first ones to rise to the top of the monolith to face off against the Witness itself, the big bad one-on-one. And since they were the first to make it to the boss, Team Parabellum had a significant advantage over everyone else. It's thanks to that they managed to be the first team to beat the raid once and for all, taking a whopping 18 hours and 59 minutes. Salvation's Edge launched at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Friday, June 7th, and this clear took place at 5 a.m. on Saturday, June 8th. This was the single longest first day race for any raid in Destiny's history, beating the previous record of 18 hours and 49 minutes set by the Last Wish raid from Forsaken. In fact, Team Parabellum was the only team to beat this raid in its first 24 hours, as the second place team was another 6 hours behind, beating the whole thing in just over 25 hours total. The craziest part of all of this, though, is that we're still not quite done.
Defenders of Soul, hear me now! Moments ago, one fire team infiltrated the Witness's monolith and shattered its hold on the Traveler's light.
Bungie recognized that a large portion of the player base never beats or even attempts raids. There have been moves to alleviate that, to make this 6-player activity easier to get into, to make finding other players easier, but still, a lot of players don't experience these things. So Bungie made the smart move to not lock the grand finale of the saga in a raid that most people won't experience. So, once the raid was beaten for the first time, once the Witness was weakened significantly, an all-new mission opened up. This makes Team Parabellum canon to the events of the story. They were the first team to open the floodgates. They separated the Witness from its hold on the Traveler, giving everyone else the opportunity to land the killing blow. And boy oh boy are we in for an action-packed mission. Call this thing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate the way everyone is here. And I do mean everyone. The MCU comparisons continue with a moment that is the Destiny equivalent of the Portal scene from Avengers Endgame. We've got Anna and Elsie Bray, we've got Mizrax, we've got Keitel, you can see Petravenge, Marasov, the Drifter, Eris Morn, Lord Shaxx is right there, Savathun shows up, Saint 14 and Osiris are here, alongside Nimbus Nimbus from Lightfall. I'm honestly surprised they made an appearance, and for all the criticisms people had towards them and Lightfall as a whole, I'm glad they made the cut for this finale. And of course, leading the charge is Crow, Ikora, Cade, and Commander Zavala, set to launch us into the final stand to save our universe. The mission that follows is nothing short of chaos, because this isn't just another standard Destiny mission. You're not going at it alone through boss fights. This is an all-out war. This is a 12-player mission. A couple years ago, there was a brief glitch that allowed for 12-player raids and activities that usually aren't allowed. It was big and chaotic, and lots of people remember it fondly. Here, Bungie must have been inspired in some way by that unintentional occurrence, because they've made an official 12-player mission. You're able to run into this encounter with 11 other Guardians and a legion of NPCs to face off against the last waves of the Witness's forces. We've got characters joining us like Saint 14, who provides a bubble shield in the middle of this arena for people to take a breather for a second. Keitel, Mizrax, Savathun, and Nimbus show up for a few moments, dropping weapons for players to take on and help them win the fight. All of the enemies you fight are tough as nails, but that's alleviated greatly when you have a whole bunch of Guardians shooting at them at once. It's a complete visual mess in a lot of ways, but honestly it's some of the most fun I've ever had playing this game. Just rushing into the chaos, trying to help other people, shooting as much as I could, but not really caring about how precise I was being, because that's not exactly the point. It's big, it's chaotic, and it's all backed by some of the most action-packed music this team has ever created. The track Stronger Together not only pumps up the adrenaline, but features motifs from across the game's history. I mean, we got Bow to No One from The Taken King. The main theme from The Witch Queen is here. The Lightfall theme even gets some time to shine. Then we get the latest action-packed rendition of the original Guardian theme, the theme that played over the main menu for Destiny 1 back in 2014. All of this is the exact push we need as players to participate in one last encounter with the Witness. We've got to hit it as hard as we possibly can, gathering powers from the light, embracing the darkness, grabbing a sword, and destroying more of these dissenting statues by the hundreds, all before laying into the Witness itself with whatever ammo we have left over, until it reaches one final moment. After we've whittled down the Witness's health enough, our ghost comes up with the idea to end this thing. We must channel the power of the light through our ghost, striking right at the Witness. Everyone on this platform fires a big old laser of light, creating one final moment, dealing just enough damage upon the Witness until...
I don't understand.
And with that, it is done. By the power of everyone involved, the Witness is finally destroyed, in one enormously climactic and satisfying battle. I mean, rushing into this area with a ton of other players, going through this semi-shared experience, I mean, the spectacle of it all makes this one of the best highlights in Destiny's entire lifespan. This isn't a moment you see very often in video games, yet Destiny was able to live up to the challenge to create a somehow satisfying end to 10 years of gaming. But of course, with a victory like that must also come sacrifice. Because after being beaten down and damaged across the campaign, our ghost has reached his limit. We've sent our power through him, and he dies as a result. The longest friendship we've ever had, the one that gave us immortality, is over. Until, of course, Cade shows up. He's been uncomfortable with the idea of coming back. He knew to help us and save the universe while he was around, but at the end of the day, his destiny lies with Sundance in the afterlife. And since he is made of the same light that the ghosts are made of, he sacrifices himself once again to save our ghost.
You're my favorite. Don't ever forget that.
Cade was never going to stick around for long. I think a lot of us knew that. And given the basis of the story, he could only ever exist within the Pale Heart. So this is a well set up conclusion for him, and one that gives him an even stronger send-off than Forsaken without undermining what people liked about that story. But now, victory has been clinched. Our ghost is alive, the last city now sits in peace, the Vanguard has reassembled with Crow officially taking on the position of Hunter Vanguard, with a new haircut, following both Cade's advice and his footsteps. And we join them with these lanterns, recreating a scene from Tangled in celebration of the destruction of the Witness and the end to the Light and Darkness saga. All of which is set to The Hope, a track created for the music of the Spheres, the musical foundation for this entire game created by Martin O'Donnell, Michael Salvatore, and Paul McCartney. We have now fulfilled our destiny. For those willing to sit and bask in this victory, there are two final scenes for you to watch. One is an inkblot cutscene that's essentially just a where are they now montage. You know, seeing where these characters go in the aftermath of this story. From Crow donning his new haircut, to Zavala and Ikora embracing the powers of the darkness, Saint 14 and Osiris are back together, Zur and Starhorse are having a great time, Crow and Mara are entertaining children, Elsie and Anna Bray are out exploring the wilderness. There's lots of great little moments in here, and it's all set to a piece of music called After All This Time, which, following in the footsteps of all of this finale's music, holds an incredible amount of significance to Destiny's history. This track might not have been heard in the game until now, but it was actually created as early as 2012. Michael Salvatore composed the track with Martin O'Donnell and Paul McCartney for the original game. In a lot of ways, it's the basis of what we'd eventually hear once the game was released. But since it was created so soon after the last Halo games, it also feels like an extension of those. A direct line can be tied through the musical journey of Halo CE all the way to Reach, and then to this track. And this particular version contains small motifs that have been created in the years since then, from all across Destiny's 10-year history. So in one 5-minute piece, as we watch this inkblot montage play out with epilogues for each of our characters, it all celebrates not just 10 years of Destiny, but 25 years of Bungie. In one 5-minute piece, you really get it all. And finally, you get this. A shot of our Guardian sitting atop the helm, looking out towards the Traveler, complete with the message Gratias Vobis Agimus from Bungie, which is Latin for we thank you. Now, originally this shot looked more like this, with an aurora spreading out from the big triangular hole in the Traveler, but it doesn't look like that anymore. If you were to run this activity now, this is what you'd see. And you can kind of sit here for as long as you want. Just taking in the scenery, taking a screenshot if you feel so inclined. This is the moment to breathe and bask in the success you've just achieved. Reception to the final shape was absolutely stellar. Reviews were calling this an enormous achievement from Bungie, and the player base at large was absolutely thrilled. After years of ups and downs and chaos and turbulence, Bungie managed to land the plane. They got their victory, they got the win they were looking for, and players could not be happier. Were there criticisms for the expansion? Absolutely. Many players noted that the first few levels felt a little slower. You know, the act of getting the band back together wasn't all that exciting. But once the story locked in for its second half, it didn't stop. coupled with the exceptional raid experience and the once-in-a-lifetime final mission that is genuinely one of my fondest memories playing this game for these last 10 years. Destiny's Light and Darkness saga was never perfect, not even a little bit. I mean, Destiny as a whole is the living embodiment of we're so back and it's so over. It's constantly flip-flopping between both of those things. But against all odds, the final shape wound up being in the we're so back territory. Once again, morale was fantastic coming out of this expansion. The entire stretch from April to July was one major highlight for Destiny players. The unfortunate reality is, like everything in this game, it wasn't gonna last. In July of 2024, just 1 month after the release of the final shape, Bungie was hit with another round of layoffs. This time, 220 people were let go from the studio, and a bunch more were transferred over to Sony, alongside one of Bungie's incubation projects, at least one of the only ones that was still around. This brought the total number of employees at Bungie down to 850, and some big names were gone as a result. Both Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy were gone now, which was almost shocking to people. They had been pulled from Destiny 2 to work on another incubation project, a project that got cancelled, and now they're just straight up not at Bungie. Once again, people credited all of this to mismanagement and bad decision-making up top, which was proven in a big way in the immediate wake of this happening, because it was quickly revealed that Pete Parsons, who'd been the CEO of Bungie since 2016, had actually used $2.5 million from the Sony buyout to buy classic cars for himself. So, while the company is floundering and people are worried about losing their houses, here's this guy buying himself expensive cars without a care in the world. Way to stick up for your employees, Pete. Ever since this happened, Destiny player morale has honestly only been getting worse over the past year and a half. Of course, the game has continued to get updates. The final shape was followed up by 3 additional episodes, as they're called, which players soon learned were just rebranded seasons, continuing the story in very similar ways. There were some interesting developments, particularly in the 3rd episode, Heresy, which put a lot of focus on the Hive as well as Eris Morn and the Drifter. But after that, Bungie gave the jumpstart to Destiny's 2nd major chapter, the Fate Saga. Kicking off this July with the Edge of Fate, which offered a much more in-depth exploration of the Nine, introducing some new ideas, characters, and concepts, some of which are pretty neat. I think the character of Lodi is a real standout. He's become a new fan favorite, which is fun. And finally, the most recent expansion is Renegades, a full-blown Star Wars crossover where you can take on the Cabal with a lightsaber. Now, I've played both of these expansions, and in terms of campaign experiences, I think they're both alright. There are some questionable gameplay decisions, particularly in the Edge of Fate, but I'm mostly enjoying the story going on here, and spending time with new and familiar characters. The reason I'm not going super in-depth on these right now is purely because this new saga has only just begun. I want to wait and see where things might go to get a better grasp on the bigger picture. Although, there's evidence to suggest that things might not last as long as planned, because the release of the Edge of Fate also brought along a number of key system changes to the game, namely the portal that have been received very poorly. Mostly because the portal does genuinely suck and has cut off a large majority of the game from the currently active sandbox. You can still play the older stuff, but it provides nothing in terms of progression anymore, which kinda sucks. These changes have not only brought about all-time lows in player morale, but all-time lows in terms of player numbers. In the 6 months between the Edge of Fate and Renegades, Destiny 2 reached its lowest number of players in its entire lifespan. And that goes beyond just Steam charts. That was true across every platform. We reached even lower than the lows of Curse of Osiris back in 2018. Renegades has thankfully made some improvements to the systems and game modes. We're not perfect yet, but we're better, and morale has definitely improved among many players that I've seen. But the game is still in a pretty unhealthy spot right now, because the numbers at launch for both of these new expansions have not been up to snuff. Looking at the website popularity report, we can see some pretty high peaks throughout this game's lifespan. We topped out when the game launched in 2017, followed by some big peaks around Forsaken and Shadowkeep, and some amount of consistency from Beyond Light to the final shape. But the Edge of Fate is way down there. less than a third of what the final shape was able to reach at launch. While the all-time lows the game experienced this year were caused by players being unenthused about the new systems, these peaks tell a darker story. People have left. Many people have been saying that Bungie made a rather crucial mistake when it came to following up the final shape. They wanted to continue to develop Destiny 2, adding to this game and this sandbox, but probably underestimated how powerful an ending could be. You can't end your 10-year saga, then go along business as usual expecting nothing to change. So now, despite improvements with Renegades and player morale, it still feels like we're watching this game slowly bleed out before our eyes. So what's the solution? Well, the solution could have been to have Destiny 3 in the works over the last couple years. Keep it building in secret, then announce it shortly after the final shape's release to get everyone excited for a bold start to the next saga. But they didn't do that. They had a number of incubation projects in the 2020s, one of them was even set in the Destiny universe, but none were Destiny 3. Only now does it feel like Bungie is finally waking up to this possibility, with rumors of a Destiny 3 in very early development. Are these rumors true? I have no idea. Will it work to save the game? I don't know that either. There's every likelihood that Destiny 3 launches in a state that's just as bad or worse than Destiny 2 did at launch. And going through that whole year-long process a third time is surely going to test people's patience. Destiny is also not their only priority, as Marathon has of course been a major focus, and that game's gone through the ringer itself, let me tell ya. In 2024, its game director Christopher Barrett was fired for sexual misconduct. Following that, it was met with less than stellar first impressions for its alpha earlier in 2025, and of course it's been mired in a plagiarism controversy, which is also not the first time Bungie has been accused of plagiarizing artwork, but it might be the most significant and most egregious example. But based on anecdotes both from October's internal test and the most recent VDOC that Bungie just released, the mood around that game seems to be shifting. The art scandal has been resolved in a satisfying way according to the original artist, and features that players have been wanting out of Marathon are gonna be implemented in time for its launch next March. Overall, sentiment appears positive going forward. Marathon might be able to bounce back and become the win Bungie needs. Which is probably a good thing, because if Marathon fails, that could prove to kill Bungie altogether. So there's a lot riding on it. The bigwigs over at Sony are most certainly frustrated with Bungie after everything that's happened these last couple years, which has caused some significant shakeups internally. For one thing, Pete Parsons is gone. He has stepped down as CEO, leaving Justin Truman, formerly Destiny 2's general manager, to take over the studio. And now, Sony has more than 50% of the decision-making power. They're going to be able to veto decisions going forward. They're essentially taking over Bungie in hopes of being able to right the ship. Who knows what that means for the long-term future, but these are the changes going on at Bungie. This leaves us with a question. Will Destiny 2 die? Now, I don't want this game to die. I, for one, have had a lot of fun playing this game over the last 10 years. I don't think it's impossible for Bungie to bounce back. Destiny has fallen into challenging holes like this before and still managed to crawl its way back out. But I do believe that that's going to be incredibly difficult this time. I don't think there's ever been a hole quite as deep as this one in the game's history. Perhaps there's a solid argument to be made that time's up. Destiny started with a promise of a 10-year journey. We're now on to year 11. We've passed the finish line. As mentioned, I don't want the game to die, but many players have become content with the possibility. The story we were all following had concluded in a satisfying way, and so many are ready to leave things behind. In the words of Savathun,
"Thanks for the memories, Guardian."
Destiny is one hell of a beast, let me tell you. It is a game that has some incredible highs and some monumental lows. Some great things have been constant through its history. You know, the gunplay has always been fantastic, the art direction has been stellar, the sound design is great, the music is absolutely amazing, and Bungie did wise up on that front, as Michael Salvatore has returned to create new music for this game. He wasn't around to contribute to The Edge of Fate, but his sound was featured all over the soundtrack for Renegades, which honestly might be the best soundtrack they've made for this game since Beyond Light. It's got some killer tracks in there. Destiny has had one of the strongest lifespans in gaming history. It's one of the only live service games to actually continue to survive years after launch, unlike many of its copycats like Anthem or The Avengers. Of course, you have games like Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite, Warframe. Stuff like that is still kicking, and in some cases is doing some of these things even better than Destiny has, including the brand new mobile game Destiny Rising, which is crazy, peering into an alternate timeline with features that players have been saying would be great if they were ported into the main game. But Destiny has always been in a league of its own. It was the front runner on this gaming trend, the one to pave the way with an imperfect yet easily addicting game in 2014. And since then, it has garnered one of the most dedicated communities that I've ever seen. That being said, this is also a game that's near impossible to recommend. Just listing off some of the things you'd have to buy to get into the meat and potatoes is insane. At the end of the day, though, I can safely say that for the most part, I enjoy Destiny. I like this game quite a bit. I wouldn't keep coming back to it if I didn't. After everything this game has done, from its nonsensical beginnings to exciting chapters in the middle to insane dips in quality throughout, the final shape brought it to enough of a solid conclusion that I felt, despite all of this game's flaws, that my journey was worth it. Through this saga that somehow managed to strike the balance of making it feel like you were both one of a million other guardians out there saving the world, and you were the singular main character at the center of it all. And in creating this video, I had a fantastic time going through the Light and Darkness saga from beginning to end, chronicling this journey over the years to see how this game evolved. Using some incredible sources like Destinypedia, which has chronicled information for practically every topic in this game's history. The Ishtar Collective website is a fantastic place for the vast lore archive this game has. From every grimoire card to every lore tab, there's tons of stuff. The Shattered Vault was a great place for me to discover what I had missed from the seasonal material, and of course the legions of creators on YouTube that have covered this game over the years. Without any of that, I wouldn't be able to find some first-hand accounts of some of these events. Overall, I had a very, very good time, and I can only hope you enjoyed it too. If you're a long-time player who's been following along super closely and wanted to relive some memories, or if you're someone who's never touched this game and thought, maybe I might give it a look. Or on the flip side, you thought, damn, glad I never got into that. Which is also fair. No matter your experience with this game, I would like to thank you for taking this journey with me, for following along on this 10-year saga as we fulfilled our destiny. Of course, there are more destinies to come. There are more journeys to face and more stories to tell. Next time, I think we're going to fulfill the destiny of one Cassian Andor, chronicling the last chapters of his story. Until then, it's time to head back up to orbit because this will be the end of this video, and I will see you guys later.